RPG! 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 RPG!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Knights of Last Call. My name is Derek Melinda, welcoming you into this Pathfinder 2 stream, where we're going to be talking tonight about the Bard. And so tonight we're going to have a little bit of acoustic guitar for our musical accompaniment, and hopefully we enjoy that as we talk about the Bard. We got a poll up, so go ahead and take a look and let us know what your thoughts are about the Bard class, as that is going to be the focus of tonight's video, or I should say tonight's stream. So hello and welcome to everybody. We've got Jackal Torn Moon saying, what up, Derek? What up, Knights? What up, Jackal Torn Moon? It's good to see you. Neardrum says, me joining the Discord just the other day and then asking about the Bard is highly suspect. Well, you know, it's not. We haven't done a spell casting class yet, and you know, obviously there's classes like the Oracle, which you know I'm pretty publicly about thinking it's not that great of a class, and Bard is a class I have a reasonable amount of experience with. So you know, there's pros and cons to all of that. But yeah, Bard's just a great class, and I'm sure we'll talk about it. London shouting out the music, DJ Derek and the Healing Power of Vibes. Indeed. Cybersmith, hello Cyber, great to see you. DJ Dizik. Frostjack, hello to you as well. Frosty, hello to you as well. Looking forward to the Knights of Last Call cookbook. Doing a joke about our Roll for Combat stream earlier this week. Dominicus Priest says, hey, Derek, how's the Invisalign? Really good. Good news is they don't have to pull out any of my teeth in order to do them. I do have to get a couple things installed on my teeth so they can attach the Invisalign to it. But yeah, they gave me like a training set, and to sort of get used to it, it's not like the full thing yet. It's like a partial set or something. I have to wear it for like a week. Yeah, so far so good. Priest also says, I only have experience with the D&D 5e Bard. Love it. So I'm excited to learn about Pathfinder 2nd Edition Bards. I have only played one 5e campaign. And Aaron ran a 5e campaign. It was very heavily house ruled, but it went from 1 to 20th level. And I played a Bard. Now, it was pretty house ruled, and we changed up a bunch of stuff. But that is the only 5e class that I actually have an entire campaign, 1 to 20's worth of experience with. So kind of on the same path there. Tiger Lemur says, Cookbook of Last Call sounds kind of epic. Kind of sweet. Kind of sounds epic. Damian Williams coming in with a $5 super chat said, when did the Bard Seduces Everything meme start, and do you hate them as much as I do? You know, we spent a good amount of time talking about this a while ago, because, you know, we were talking about, like, we have a thing on our Discord where we have cringe RPG content, and one of the things that we always see in Reddit, especially the D&D 5e Reddit, is people talking about over-sexualized, hyper-sexualized bards. And I was legitimately like, look, I have been playing this game for a very, very, very long time, and I never saw that. And apparently some people did, but a lot of people, I was like, I think it started with Scanlan, and I really think Sam Riegel, you know, kind of took it to 11. And people just have become so, you know, obsessed with Critical Role and this 5e zeitgeist. I don't know. I think people of certainly of my age, right? I'm late 30s, early 40s. My kind of like thought process to the Bard was really like Edward from Final Fantasy 2/4 and the D&D Bard, which never really struck me as being a womanizer. So yeah, I didn't quite. I never quite understood where that came from. And certainly growing up, it was never a thing that we did. Now, sometimes the bards would be played as like silly or like foppish, but they were never played as being like a hypersexual predator. So yeah. Zerver's happy to have you here. Thank you for joining. JG, bards, PF2 bards are fantastic, powerful, and absolutely awful to play. Ooh, JG, sounds like you're gonna have some tea to spill. I am playing a bard in Northern Reaches 2, currently named Derek Manilow. However, I might change it to Stevie Wonder and try to play a bind PC. Thoughts? I'd rather you go with Derek Manilow than Stevie Wonder. Let's try not to use real life people. Derek Manilow at least is a funny joke, so I can appreciate the Derek Manilow better. Let's see here. Something the last video Barbarian focused on a lot was combat. Yeah, I think exploration and social pillars matter too. Hit points plus weather damage, for example. Barbarian is less likely to get heat stroke. That is true. They do have more hit points, and that's pretty much all weather does. In fact, I think Strat figured out that like a high level character takes 1d6 points of damage in like pretty extreme weather every 10 minutes. So you're only taking like 3 or 4 hit points an hour, or sorry, like 15 hit points an hour. So as long as you cast like 1 or 2 heals a day, you could actually just survive with absolutely no protection in like extreme cold. So that is something that's true. Gargs is spending their anniversary with KLC instead of their wife. But they may have more time to gain soon. So good job, Gargs. Hope that works out well for you. Let's see here. My friend who is a 5e player. Welcome, Princess Salami. I saw you just subscribed. Welcome. My friend who is a 5e player and only plays Bard is trying to Bard for our Plaguestone game. So I'm curious to hear about Bards in 2nd edition. Yeah. All right, great. Well, you joined the right stream to do that. King Fate 20. Welcome. Bard is the fighter of support. Inspire Courage is like a fighter's +2. Built-in support that is top tier with no hoops to jump through. King Fate 20, I think you're up. I think you're up barking up the right tree. I kind of agree. Jackal Torn Moon says Spoony Bard. Exactly. Spoony Bard. That is what Tella, of course, calls Edward after he blames her for the death of his daughter Anna. Charisma has always been a weird stat, and people take it as beauty a lot, which is fine if people take it as beauty. But that I think that the hypersexualization part is cringy and weird. Now, London is saying that his buddies in the mid-2000s were on the horny Bard train. So, they were drama kids. Yeah, that could be it. You know, it's interesting. London, you're talking about mid-2000s, and Priest is talking about 3rd edition. And it's interesting because 3rd edition, now, obviously, I played a lot of 3rd edition. I was playing D&D when it came out, but I started, right, with 2nd edition and basic. 3rd edition was the first edition that had, like, the diplomacy skill. It was the first time that we had, like, diplomacy! And, you know, you had to use high-level diplomancers who could, like, bend people's will with their diplomacy checks somehow. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe if you grew up in a time before diplomacy checks were a thing, it wasn't really part of your game. Ryan says Bard is better as the dedication. We'll talk about that, Ryan. There's actually a couple things I really do not like about the Bard dedication. Zach says the stream is glitching. Hopefully that's not for everybody. Let me know if anybody else is getting any sort of sound glitches or anything. Jason says mechanically the Bard is a fine class. Flavor-wise, I don't think the Bard works at all. Honestly, I think something like the Thaumaturge would have been a better model for the Bard. No, Jason, we'll definitely talk about that as well. For Bard, Hoyrit says, for Bard, I think of Tom Maryland. It's Thom there, Hoyrit. But yes, Tom from Wheel of Time. Yes. No magic, just like a glee man. And, we'll talk about that. Frostjack says, it's also my anniversary with my partner. I'm at work listening to this. I think they're at home also watching. Well, if you are Frostjack's partner, hello. Happy anniversary. Multi-muse to get Enigma and Maestro and a Bard is legit high A tier. Okay, your wife is out of town. Okay, Gargs, you get a free pass. Yeah, Scanlan spawned a legion of cringy horny bards. Yeah. Up to 5e in Pathfinder 2nd edition, I always thought the Bard was dumb. All right, Mark. Holy horny rogues. It's always the players, not the class. All right. How is the action to play the tune each turn and not a hoop? Yeah, we'll talk about the action economy there. For sure. I think the music as magic comes a lot from the creation of Middle Earth from the Silmarillion. Absolutely, that's an influence, 100%. All right, yeah, so let's take a look here. So 64% of you said that, or 63% of you rather, said that you thought that the bard was A tier. 16% of you thought they were B, 14% of you thought they were S tier, and only 4% of you thought they were C tier or lower. And, again, it's not completely scientific, but 61 people voting. I think we can all agree that the bard probably is a very solid class in Pathfinder 2nd edition. It's neither too powerful. It doesn't force out other classes, like maybe the fighter does or the sorcerer does, but it's also, it does what it says on the tin. It gives you the right tools to do what you need to do. And it just performs. And, again, most of you, I'd love for every class to be an A. And, I don't want classes to be S tier. I don't want classes, B tier is okay, but A is probably ideal. And so I think the bard does really, really particularly well at that. So let's talk about the bard and the interesting journey, because the bard is a weird class, right? We can all agree that the bard is kind of a strange class because depending on where you come from, you may not really even understand how why does the bard have this weird array of magical abilities? And to be honest with you, the bard has sort of changed across many editions, many times. And on top of that, a lot of people are like, wait a second, he's a bard or she's a bard. Isn't that like, from old England with a lute or a harp and a singer? Like, what does that have to do with a character class in Dungeons and Dragons, and why is that in there? So we are going to talk about that. All right. So we're going to start with the Strategic Review number 6, volume 2, number 1, published in February 1976. Now, at this point, first edition Dungeons and Dragons hasn't even been released yet. Okay? People are still playing the original little white books, the little brown books, I should say, the original 3-pack. So this is 0th edition. This is, original D&D, where the original classes were like fighting man, magic user, and cleric. And this magazine, which would eventually become known as Dragon, Dragon magazine, was called the Strategic Review. And they did, each month they did different, they didn't really, they're a little bit like Battle Cry in that they didn't actually make a publishing date every month, which is, good for them. But they would have stuff about wargaming, and they would have stuff about, all sorts of stuff in the gaming sphere. And of course, as D&D was becoming more popular, they started including new articles for new stuff for your D&D. And so in 1976, February, we get an article about a new class called the Bard. Okay, and this was a brand new class that had never been seen before. And I think what we could talk about here really quick is sort of where the Bard originally came from. And actually, I'm going to read this here. I believe it is a logical addition to the D&D scene, and the one that I have composed is a hodgepodge of at least 3 different kinds. So right off the bat, the original person who brought bards into Dungeons and Dragons, Doug Schwegman, is admitting the bard is a hodgepodge. It is 3 entirely separate ideas from history, kind of mushed and mashed into one. We have the concept of the Norse Skald, which were these, legendary warrior poets from Viking and Norse mythology who accompanied, kings and battles to tell their stories and their tales, and were fearsome warriors in their own right. Then we have the actual Celtic bard, the only real bard in terms of, using the name bard. And again, in Celtic mythology, the bards were sort of messengers and diplomats of the Druids, which were like the leader sect of the Celts. And lastly, we get the idea of the Southern European minstrel, that sort of French, Italian, wandering singer, maybe a bit of a ne'er-do-well. And So, all three of these ideas existed, and Doug Schwegman was like, I am going to jam all of these into one class. And there's a couple interesting things here. The Skalds were often old warriors who were assigned a kind of self-appointed historian whose duty was to record the ancient battles, blood feuds, and deeds of exceptional prowess by setting them to verse, very much like the ancient Greek poets did. Tolkien, a great Nordic scholar, copied this style several times in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, for example, Bilbo's chant of Eärendil the Mariner. The Celts, particularly in Britain, had a much more organized structure in which the post of bard, I think that's a misspelling here, in which the post of bard as official historian fell somewhere between Guelphi or public recorders and the druids, who were judges as well as spiritual leaders. In the Celtic system, bards were trained by the druids for a period of almost 20 years before they assumed their duties, among which was to follow the heroes into battle to provide an accurate account of their deeds, as well as to act as trusted intermediaries to settle hostilities between opposing tribes. By far, the most common conception of the bard is of the minstrel, who entertained to courts and princes and kings in France, Italy, and parts of Germany in the later Middle Ages. Such a character was not as trustworthy as the Celtic or Northern bards. Because remember, these Celtic and Nordic bards were, pivotal members of their society. They were not these kind of fringe, scoundrel outcasts. They were almost part of the core, ethos of their societies, and could be compared to a combination of thief and illusionist. These characters were called jongleurs by the French, from which the corrupt turn of juggler and court jester are remembered today. The question of this was from the Strategic Review, February 1976, Volume 2, Issue 1, Mr. H. And this is what I think is really interesting here. I wanted to put the bard into perspective so that his multitudinous abilities in Dungeons & Dragons could be explained. I have fashioned the character more after the Celtic and Norse types than anything else. Thus, this is important, thus he is a character who resembles a fighter more than anything else, but knows something about the mysterious forces of magic and is well adept with his hands. So the original idea of the bard in 1976 was as more of a fighter character who ends up having a bit of abilities kind of thief-like and magic user-like. So if you could think about it, it's coming from these three traditions, right? The Viking, the Nordic skald, the Celtic bard, and sort of the European minstrel. And from that, we can see that the skald sort of represents the fighting abilities, and the Celtic druid bard, kind of concept represents the magic ability, and the minstrel sort of represents that rogue or that scoundrel behavior. And we can see here, this is of course from the 1976 edition, and we're not going to go through everything here, but we can see that the bard in the original D&D had D6 hit points, putting it somewhere, and back then, by the way, remember, fighters only got D8, clerics got D6, rogues got D4, all right, thieves, they were called D4s, magic users got D4s. So this put the bard very clearly into, the same combative level as the cleric. And we could see that they picked up magic user spells all the way up to 7th level. So they didn't get the full progression of spells like a wizard would, but they did get a decent amount of spells. In addition, the bard gained the ability, based off a percent chance here, charm and lore, to be able to potentially charm or otherwise magically mesmerize a character or a foe with their song by hearing their song. So there's this idea of the fascination ability, which is right there from the beginning. And they can only use this ability once per day. And then lastly, we also see that bards' lore represents their collection of legends, knowledge of magic. This is the percentile chance of a bard telling what certain objects or legends will do. So right from the beginning, the bard basically had what we know today as bardic lore, sort of a singing vocal, chant ability, and of course, some spells. And we can also see lastly that they gain some, there we go, some thief abilities. They are limited to chainmail and leather armor. They can climb walls and they can move silently as a thief, and they do not get backstab. So they can hide, move silently, cast some magic spells, and this is all the way back in 1976. Now keep in mind, this was not created by Gary Gygax. This was created by this Doug Schwagman guy. Well, guess what? Turns out that the Bard class was pretty popular, and so much so that when Gary Gygax came back, oh, we got a tip?
Domencius tipped $10. Great discussions. Really enjoying your Bard stream.
Cheers. Appreciate it. It's a nice drink. Diet Dr. Pepper. Thank you for the tip. Thank you for the shout out. So, what's interesting is we go into first edition D&D. Where does the horny bard come from? Meanwhile, the very first edition has charm built in. Yeah, but Stan, I think the idea of charm and horniness / sexual assault is a little bit of a bridge there that you're taking. That the idea that just because you have the ability to, fascinate and calm the savage beast. In fact, actually, if we go back to that strategic review, it talks about, the song of the bard soothing the heart of the monster, or even, I believe they use the exact example of charming like a dragon. Yeah, here we go. Some monsters even consider a bard to be a great treasure, and many legends are told of dragons who refuse to let a bard stop playing their restful melodies. So again, there's kind of an idea of that. So we get to first edition, and my understanding of this is Gary Gygax didn't like that the Bard class had become popular, and he didn't like that it got published in some non-official D&D. So he decided to put his Bard into first edition D&D, but it's in the appendix, okay? It's in the appendix. It's in Appendix 2 of the original, this version of the Player's Handbook, right? From 1979. And it's all the way in the back. Now, what's really interesting about this is a couple of things change. For starters, Gary Gygax, probably much more of a stickler for history, made it so that in some ways the Bard was very similar. It's still a D6 hit point class. Okay, it gets a 6-sided die for hit point accumulation. It also has a charm percentage, just like that 1976 original Bard did, as well as the ability to know legends and lore about certain items. So we have all of this, but the Bard also, Gary Gygax thought that bards were definitely Celtic in origin. And so Gary got rid of magic users spells, and Gary gave them druid spells. So unlike the original Bard, the first edition Bard gained druid magic. And we can see again that they gain some number of spells, but not all the way to 9th level, right? They are still primarily a variety of casters. In fact, what's really interesting about the Bard is the Bard wasn't even really a class, okay? The Bard was the very first instance, okay, almost 30 years or almost 20 years early, of a prestige class. Damien says, Gygax hated organization as much as I hate profit. Very, very, very true. So he did love throwing stuff around, because if you look at the Bard, number one, just like every class from the original editions, bards, especially bards that were, classes that were more powerful, they needed to have a 15 or better in strength, wisdom, dexterity, and charisma. Now, this is back, by the way, when you were rolling 3d6 for your stats. So a bard needed to have a 15 or higher in strength, wisdom, dexterity, and charisma. Also, you needed to have a 12 in intelligence. Also, you needed to have at least a 10 in constitution. In case you're not noticing this class was almost impossible to qualify for. And in some ways, a lot of people say Gary did that on purpose. because he didn't like the bard. So, he included. In fact, look at even what he says here. Talk about some passive aggressive writing. Okay. As this character class subsumes, means takes over, the functions of 2 other classes, fighters and thieves, and then tops them off with magical abilities, it is often not allowed by dungeon masters, right? He's basically saying this class is kind of OP and broken. You shouldn't allow it. And your GM will be the final arbiter as to the inclusion of bards in your campaign. Gary is basically saying, I hate this class. I hate that it's popular. I'm going to include it so that way I can now say, nope, you got to use my version because my version is official, but it's impossible to qualify for and it's extremely difficult, and you maybe shouldn't include it. But here's the best part about it. You don't start at level 1 as a bard. Bards begin play as fighters, and they have to remain fighters until they get to at least 5th level. Then, after getting to 5th level in fighter, but before getting to 8th level, you have to become a thief. And then before 9th level, you leave off thieving and begin druidic study. And at this time, you're actually a bard and under druidic tutelage. So a bard starts off as basically has to take levels in fighter, then take levels in thief, and then and only then can they become a bard. So if you're familiar with Pathfinder 1 and with 3rd edition D&D, this sounds very similar to the concept of the prestige class. And in fact, the designers of 3rd edition have said in various Dragon Magazine articles and seminars that the idea of the bard was the genesis of the prestige class concept. The idea of a class that is, a premium class, and you kind of have to, pay your price in by jumping through some hoops. But yeah, and also, by the way, you can only be human or half elven. So we've got this class now. And by the way, if we look here, bards, a bard always engages at combat at the level that he or she attained as a fighter. So your bard was just as good as a fighter. By the way, you were allowed to use leather armor or magical chainmail. You were proficient with swords, including bastard swords, broadswords, long swords, spears, slings, staffs, javelins, and darts. So they had most weapons, but not all weapons. And we continue to see from the 1976 Bard that they could get light and medium armor, chainmail, but they could not get heavy armor. But in addition to all of these rogue abilities and the charm abilities, for the first time ever in 1st edition, we see the bard's poetic ability raises the morale of associated creatures by 10%. It can likewise inspire ferocity in attack, so hit probability die rolls are given a bonus of +1. Both of these characteristics require 2 rounds of poetics to inspire the desired effects, i.e. 2 rounds of poetics will raise morale and cause ferocity, but 1 round will do neither. This effect lasts for 1 complete turn. Notice, in this edition, turn means 10 minutes. So here we see the first instance of what we would now call inspire courage. And in fact, the bonus is kind of the same. It gives you a +1 to hit, and it gives you a 10% increase to morale, which nowadays we would say is like a +2 bonus to will saving throws versus fear, which is exactly what it still does in Pathfinder 2nd edition today. And so it's very interesting how the 1st edition Bard, took the original concept, changed it over to druids. They are still a full fighter. They are still a full thief, and they make saving throws on whichever table is the most favorable. So they really are a broken class. In addition, they get these poetic abilities, the charm abilities, the legend lore ability. They can negate harpies and similar vocal attacks, as we know. And, yeah, so the Bard is obviously pretty powerful. And they also, by the way, randomly, they get to do extra stuff with the following magical items: drums of panic, horns of blasting, lyre of building, and pipes of the sewer. So, Gary basically said, okay, bards are completely busted and broken. That's why I'm sticking them in the back of the book. They're basically a prestige class. Oh, and also bards are Celtic. Celtics are druids. I'm getting rid of the magic user thing, and I'm making them a druid. Well, this was 1979. Cut to about 6 or 7 years later, Gary Gygax is kicked out from the company he started, and it is now owned by a different person. And they make 2nd edition Dungeons and Dragons. And guess what? The Bard is back. But now the Bard is just a core class. But most importantly, the Bard is now a part of the Rogue type, which means thieves and bards are in the same group. And in fact, you can see here that under the thief section here, we have the thief section. We now have the Bard. So in 2nd edition, they move the Bard from this great fighter, great thief, solid magic user, and they firmly start to place the Bard into more of a rogue role. Now, you can still see that they had pretty high ability requirements, but nowhere near as high as they needed in 1st edition. Now, they still need dex, they still need int, they still need charisma, a good charisma at that, by the way. But it's not the insane things that we saw in 1st edition. Yes, this blueprinting was extremely, extremely nostalgic. But we can see here, a bard by his nature tends to learn many different skills. He's a jack of all trades, but a master of none. Although he fights as a rogue, he can use any weapon, and he can wear any armor up to and including chainmail. So again, the idea that bards were melee characters, maybe not quite as proficient as fighters anymore, but now they're fighting more like rogues. They can use heavier armor, but again, still the problem being that they're no longer this complete, fighting brick shithouse. Okay. But they still get rogue abilities. Now, they don't get all the rogue abilities. They get climb walls, detect noise, pick pockets, and read languages, and they get to increase those 4. They don't get find and remove traps, for example. That's still just something that is a rogue. And we see now, by the way, that they get a spell progression, and this spell progression is very similar to the one that we've seen since 1976. They get up to about 5th or 6th level of magic. They don't get all the way to the highest levels of magic, but Gary Gygax was out, and the old school people were back in, and now, you guessed it, the Bard is back to casting wizard spells. So now that a Bard is in 2nd edition, they get rid of their original progression, and they get magic user progression. By the way, there is no requirement of what spells they can cast. They can cast whatever spells they want to have, and back then they had a spell book. What's interesting, though, what is interesting about 2nd edition is 2nd edition still had a carryover from 1st edition, which is that the classes required my poor computer. By the way, I'd like to point out something. Running OBS and streaming this, 4K thing with the various background and all the chat takes less of my CPU time than having PDFs open. PDFs are the worst thing that have ever been created by man. Back during this era, I got to go find the right page. Classes progressed at different rates based off of their experience. Let me see if I can find it here. Okay, here we go. So this is the fighter warrior. So you can see, by the way, from this chart that in order to reach level 2, a fighter needed 2,000 experience. But a paladin or a ranger needed 2,250, right? So paladins and rangers were kind of more powerful. And so they needed more experience to level up. That's right. Not everyone was on different progressions. But here's the key. The rogue, by the way, the wizard, look how much the wizard needs. The wizard needs 2,500. So the wizard needs, the fighter needed 2,000. The wizard needs 2,500 just to get to level 2. But our friend, the bard, is a rogue and is in the rogue class. The thief and the bard only required 1,250 XP in order to get to level 2. That is literally half what the wizard needed. Okay. And so by the time the wizard got to their 2,500 experience points, you are now level 3. And what this meant is that the bard and the rogue were always higher level than everybody else, and by a significant amount. And so the net result of it is, though, even though the bards had this slowed progression of spellcasting, they actually were really powerful because they actually got all their fighting abilities and all of their magic abilities. They weren't as good as fighters, or they weren't as good as wizards, but because they were higher level, they kind of were equivalent. So it's actually a real, and they only use D6 hit dice. They didn't use D8s or D10s, but they would have more of them because they were higher level. So it's really, really interesting how the experience points in 2nd edition kind of made the bard kind of powerful and broken. But we can see now that the bard is very clearly being associated with the thief, and being a bit of a scoundrel and sort of a dabbler. And this would continue into the 3rd edition of the game, which is also kind of what the basis of Pathfinder 1st edition is. The bard is predominantly a spellcaster, but they don't get all the way up to 9th level spells. They only get up to 6th level spells. They get the rogue's base attack bonus. They get up to plus 15 to hit at level 20, whereas fighters and paladins and rangers would get to plus 20. A wizard would only get to plus 10. So a bard was very solidly in the middle of this progression. However, we could see that they were still kind of like a rogue in that they got D6 hit dice, and they got a good number of skills and skill points. They were proficient with all weapons, and they could pick one martial weapon. So we're starting to see the bard's combat ability shrink and shrink and shrink. They used to be proficient with all weapons. Now it's just simple weapons and one of the following sort of martial weapons. In addition, bards can now cast in armor, but if they go too heavy, if they wear chainmail or something heavier, they're going to get arcane spell failure, because arcane spell failure was introduced for the first time in 3rd edition. So bards kind of had to be forced to wear lighter armor. They could wear leather armor or studded leather armor, and then eventually in 3.5 they could wear a chain shirt, which was redesigned to be a light armor. So the bard, basically, from what we know is in PF1, is very solidly kind of hemmed in here. And we can see that the bard gets these musical abilities, though. They still get the Inspire Courage, which gives you still, by the way, a +1 bonus to attack rolls. Look, we remember how it was like look at that. +2 morale bonus to saving throws against fear, which is the same thing we saw, a 10% bonus to morale, and a +1 morale bonus to attack rolls and damage rolls. So it got a little bit better because now it's the damage rolls too. Hey, Jonka, thank you.
Mechanically, the PF2 bard is very solid. Flavor-wise, I think I prefer the 13th Age or even 5e bard. When I think bard, I don't think of spells that revolve around eldritch tentacles grappling people. Loving this series. Which class is next?
Jonka, thank you so very much. Appreciate it. By the way, if you want to support this stream and streams like it, there's a lot of ways to kind of show your love to Knights of the Last Call. You can go ahead and leave us a tip. We have a link in the doobly-doo below, or you can type !tip. That'll take you over to our Stream Elements tip page where you can send us money directly. Or you could use YouTube super chat function, which is a little bit easier, but YouTube gets their cut. You can also check out our Patreon. We have a link to that below as well, where we kind of discuss and talk about all these things as you get access to our private Discord as part of that. So we also start to see something here, which is just sort of a general observation, which is all of these bard abilities, they used to just get. They used to just get it at first level. If you were a bard in 1976, or if you were a bard in 1979, or if you were a bard in 1989, you got the ability to inspire courage and countersong the magic of harpies and sirens, to fascinate people with your voice, to inspire people, to magically suggest people. You just got all of these abilities right from the get-go because you were a bard. And for the first time ever, we start to see the design creep in, which is still very much present in Pathfinder 2, where they still give you all those abilities, but now they dole it out to you a little bit at a time. And so the bard, you can see, picks up, they start the game with Inspire Courage, but then they have to wait until they can fascinate people. And then they have to wait until they can charm people. And then they have to wait until they can inspire, greatness. So you still get all the same abilities in 3rd edition as you did in 2nd edition, by the way. But now they make you have to level up almost to 9th level until you get all of those bardic music abilities that before you just got automatically. Now you have to level up just to get them. So there's kind of like an element there where like it feels like you're gaining cool stuff. But if you had been playing D&D before this, you used to just go, man, I used to just get all of this just for playing the class. So it's kind of interesting how it starts to kind of narrow in a little bit. Cybersmith, $5, £5, Super Chat says, studded leather should never have been in D20. It has no basis in history. It is one of the sacred cows that needs to be removed, or be brigadine. Yeah, there's quite a bit of armor in D&D, which is pretty historically inaccurate. And I think we definitely know that one of those is studded leather armor. But you know, hey, it is a fantasy game, so we can kind of guess go with what we want to go with. I don't even know what the purpose of the studs is. That is a great question, Shadram. So quickly, as we kind of wrap up, I do want to talk about, this is the 3.5 bard, by the way, very similar. I want to spend a quick moment about this bard, which you may not know. This is the 4th edition bard. And the 4th edition bard, 4th edition had, roles that, each character class belonged to. So it told you what your job was. And there were 4 heroic roles that you could fill. One was defender, one was striker, one was controller, and one was leader. And leaders were the healers and buffers of 4th edition. And just like the cleric was the leader of the divine power source, and the warlord was the leader of the martial power source, the bard was the arcane leader. And so the bard in 4th edition was honestly more of a healer and buffer than they were anything else. Now, they still get some of their cool things. They get, we can see they still get that chainmail proficiency. They get access to simple weapons, but they also get long sword and short sword. So there's still this sort of dabbling with them being somewhat proficient in fighting. But, they're not a wizard, right? They're not a wizard. They get these, extra weapons. But now, if we look, the class is now, they still get, their ability to, have sort of a bardic expertise. But now, bards were a healer, and bards gained, as a sort of, first level ability, majestic word. And like all leaders, they could utter words laden with preternatural inspiration, restoring your allies' stamina and making wounds seem insignificant. Because something that we didn't talk about, which I think is important to talk about, 3rd edition brought in the idea of the bard spell list. Before 3rd edition, in 2nd edition and in 1st edition, the bard just used the magic user spell list, which meant the bard was not healing anybody. 3rd edition was the first time they sort of said, let's kind of meld the cleric spell list, some of the wizard spell list, and make a bard spell list. And so the first time ever in 3rd edition, you had bards who could heal. And the bard spell list was very much definitively a sort of illusions and magic and support and buffing. It really did not contain any sort of offensive capabilities whatsoever. And so the 4th edition bard kind of leaned into that all the way. And because it was a leader and not really a big damage dealer, their abilities were mostly tied around healing and support. And then last but not least, we come to the 5th edition bard, which I got a chance to play. And at this point, we can see here that they get only light armor. The chainmail is gone. They still get long swords and rapiers and short swords. But they are now fundamentally a spellcasting class, right? Now we can see that they get, now it's not quite the same as like a wizard, but now we can see for the first time ever that a bard is going all the way up to the highest level magic in the game, which is 9th. And we had previously never seen this. And the bard, now granted, depending on what bard college you took, for example, if you took the College of War, your bard technically became more proficient at sort of fighting and was a little bit more of a meleeer. But for the most part, a bard in 5th edition really became more of a spellcaster and support character because of bardic inspiration, where they could hand out these bardic inspiration dies and let people roll them to add bonuses. And so the idea of the bard as this sort of fighting person who had these rogue scoundrel abilities and just a dash of magic has now sort of gone away, and we have mostly a spellcaster, which has, they can technically use weapons, but it's probably not a good idea that they do use the weapons. And finally, that brings us all the way to Pathfinder 2nd edition Bard. And at this point, all of these editions of Bard, which we had previously talked about in history, were present when they decided to roll out Pathfinder 2nd edition. And in my personal opinion, they kind of went the route of 5th edition, which was to make the Bard a spellcaster. And the Pathfinder 2nd edition Bard is, in my opinion, the most probably spellcastery Bard that we have seen yet. Now, they still get trained in longsword and whip and short sword, and they still get trained in light armor, as opposed to a wizard who only is trained in simple wizard weapon, not even simple wizard weapon, but specific wizard weapons, and they get trained in unarmored. But the fact of the matter is, the Bard is no longer really in any capability or capacity a combatant. They are first and foremost and completely a spellcaster. And we can see here that now they get the full spellcasting progression all the way to 10th level, getting 3 and 3 and 3. Just like anybody but a sorcerer, right? And they are a spontaneous caster. Now, that being said, they still get some cool powers and abilities, and they get access to some really interesting composition spells, which we'll talk about as we talk about Pathfinder 2nd edition. But I think part of the thing that we really have to accept and understand as we talk about these bards is they are now more or less a spellcaster. And, I think what they decided when they were doing the release of the game is in Pathfinder 2nd edition, they got rid of the idea of individual class spell lists, and now you have the 4 key traditions. You have occult, you have arcane, you have primal, and you have divine. And they kind of, I'm sure what they wanted was to have sort of a centerpiece for each of those traditions. Now, they knew a sorcerer could be all 4 depending on their bloodline, and eventually you would get access to things like the witch or the oracle, which can take multiple traditions. But in the core game, it was like, okay, well, wizards are obviously the arcane class. They are sort of our default, only can be one thing, spellcaster. That's the wizard. Clerics, duh, are divine. Druids, duh, are primal. And so bards kind of got slotted into being the primary occult caster. Jason, I completely agree with you. That is what the witch should have been. The witch, if there was, given the history lesson that I just told you, if there was ever a class that should have been able to choose from a variety of traditions, hell, maybe not even be tied into a single tradition, but to be able to pick, almost like a sorcerer can with cross-blooded evolution, from multiple different traditions, it was the bard. And unfortunately, this is probably the only thing that I really dislike about the Pathfinder 2nd edition Bard, which is the occult spell tradition is kind of all over the place in terms of its theme and its tone. Because while it has all of the sort of mental, psychic, illusion, charm magic that we've come to associate with the modern day Bard, since like 3rd edition, it also has all of the strange, weird occult spells like, vomit swarm and gut ropes and, tentacle extrusion and dark blasts of life-draining energy. None of these things feel appropriate to the Bard, even in Pathfinder 2nd edition. And I know, you don't have to take those spells, but you can. And I think that matters. And I understand that they did this mostly as a way to shoehorn in having to avoid doing class specific lists, because now they can just release a new spell and say it's part of the occult tradition and the arcane tradition, and it automatically sort of links onto that. Which is convenient for, ease of use and not having to reprint the class lists all the time and not being, really crazy and weird. But I do think that they could have put in the witch could have been core, and the witch could have been the primary occult caster, or they could have added like a warlock type class if they wanted to do something different and made that be the sort of occult. I mean, when you look at the occult spell list, from weird charms and illusions and magic to strange protective wards to weird, creepy occult shit, that to me screams witch. Those are all the things that we expect a witch to do, right? To be tricky and sneaky and using illusions and charming you with their, Snow White ass shit, while also being kind of mysterious and tapping into powers that man was not meant to know. The bard is not that class, but that is what it is presented as. It is by default, actually, the only class in the game that can only use the occult tradition. Every other class can use different traditions, except for the bard. So it really doesn't make any sense at all. And it is by far my biggest complaint about the bard. My second biggest complaint about the bard is we're going to about get. By the way, I think the bard is excellent. I'm just giving you this background. Jonka with the $5 super chat says, I suppose grasping tendrils and some other cult spells could be in flavor for the bard. I mean, anything could be repurposed or reflavored, and I suppose you could make anything make sense. But given the historical road that the bard had, for me, as someone who's been playing the game for 30 years, it is very strange to me how they present the bard, especially because they still include things like composition cantrips. They're still saying, oh, the bard is a master of music and their song can lift your spirits and inspire courage. And oh my God, the bard just vomited out a swarm. Right? Correct. I am intentionally ignoring the implication. So the other problem I have with the bard, let's hop over to our friendly neighborhood progression charts. The bard starts with trained weapon. Now, granted, they get simple weapons, plus they get a couple martial weapons. Hooray. But, I don't know why people are so happy about rogues getting martial weapons and wizards getting simple weapons, because that doesn't really make a difference. What makes a difference is how proficient you are in the weapon. And if we look, we can see that a bard starts at trained in their weapons and they become an expert at 11. And just like every other spellcaster in the game, the sorcerer, the summoner, the witch, the wizard, the oracle, at level 11, they start at level 1 at trained, and at level 11, they become an expert. The only thing, and this thing is so stupid, they give the bard critical specialization. Why? Who cares? Who is attacking at level 11 with their bard? Your bard is going to be like 5 points of attack roll behind anybody else in the party. They are not hitting, let alone critically hitting. But somehow the bard inexplicably gets this critical specialization at level 11. Oblivion Hold says the same people who are attacking at level 11 with the Cloister Cleric. Yeah, which is also completely silly, Oblivion Hold. Now, to be clear, the Cloister Cleric only gets that with their favorite deity's favorite weapon. It's so weird to me because, and this is getting into one of the things I don't like about the bard, because even though they give the bard inexplicably critical specialization, the bard has no melee capability, right? In first edition, the bard and in original D&D, the bard was fought as a fighter. They were literally just as good as a fighter. By the time we get to third edition, the bard was on the cleric and the rogue spell progression, right? They got that plus 15 BAB as opposed to the plus 10 that the wizard or the sorcerer got. By the time we get to Pathfinder second edition, they are essentially a non-combatant. They are a spellcaster, and they have to be, right? Because as we showed before, the bard, They are a trained, expert, master, legend spellcaster. The same as a cleric, the same as a druid, the same as a wizard. They are a primary spellcaster. And that means that they cannot be a fighter or a combatant in any way. Critical strike is not applied to spellcasting, John. We can also see that the bard does get light armor. So at least they kind of kept that behind. And to be clear, it's not bad. A bard, I mean, eventually everybody ends up at the same initiative anyways. Same armor class anyways, but the bard gets a little bit of a start. And Orpheus, I agree, they lost their scaldness. And that's kind of what I wanted to paint here. In the beginning, even the original author of the bard said they are fighters. And in first edition, they had to start their career off as fighters, and they got to fight as the same level of fighters. So they were fighters who also could sing and produce magical abilities, but were also a little bit scoundrelly. By the time you make it to second edition and third edition D&D, they've become more rogues. They're no longer the sort of combatant characters they used to be. Now they get more rogue abilities, thief abilities. They have a D6 hit points. They're on the rogue attack bonus, right? They are very clearly now in the rogue category. Their magic ability is still present, but it only goes up to level 6. By the time we get to 5th edition and Pathfinder 2nd edition, the rogues are now, or the bards, are now a spellcaster. Their fighting abilities have sort of been left behind. They still maintain some of their cool, weird skill, bardic stuff. But in Pathfinder 2nd edition, you only get that stuff if you spend a feat on it. So all those abilities that you used to just get as a bard now are things that you have to spend your feats on. So yes, in Pathfinder 2nd edition, you do get 10 feats to pick your abilities. But like, just to get the stuff that the bard used to get automatically takes like 5 or 6 feats. So in a sense, and it's going to take you up till about level 10. So just like in 3rd edition or Pathfinder 1, the bard isn't really getting more in Pathfinder 2. They're just getting the same stuff they got before. It's just now you have to wait longer and you have to spend your feats on them. So it's kind of a pyrrhic victory. Basically, the martial bard is dead. The roguish bard, which I think kind of made the most sense, is kind of dead. And now the bard is very much a spellcaster. And 2nd edition, Pathfinder 2nd edition, definitely leans into that. Cybersmith, $2, says, do we need a scald as an occult magus using wave casting? Would that be cool? Yeah, maybe that would be cool. I mean, I think the idea of it is kind of interesting. I think the magus is only arcane, right? So an occult magus. I don't know what spells you're casting, but so anyways, we've got the bard. Their weapon proficiency sucks. Their armor proficiency sucks. Their spell casting is the same as a wizard or sorcerer or cleric. Their fortitude save sucks. It starts at trained. It caps at expert at 9. Their reflex save kind of sucks. It starts at trained, and then 3 levels later, it goes to expert and never gets any better. And then their will save starts at expert and does go all the way to legendary. And by the way, with reflex, they don't get any sort of evasion ability, and with fortitude, they don't get any sort of juggernaut ability. So there is no save specialization on the bard except for the will save. And in that regard, they are, they kind of have a better saving throws than the wizard. The wizard probably has the worst saving throws in the game. But because they do get this legendary will save, which only the investigator, possibly the monk, and the oracle get, the wizard caps out at master. And the wizard only gets expert in reflex and expert in fort save. The wizard has absolutely terrible saves. And of course, their key stat is int, so it doesn't line up with any of these 3 things. And of course, the bard's key stat is charisma, which also doesn't help any of your saves. So, whenever your key stat is one of the 3 saves, you're in pretty good shape or good luck. So their saves aren't really that great, I would say. They do get okay will saves, the will saves aren't bad. And their perception caps at master. At least it starts at expert, so they get a little bit of a proficiency bump over their like witch and wizard spell casting friends. So, you know, they get 8 hit points instead of 6. So they're a little bit of a tougher spell casting class. But man, the days of them being any sort of fighter are just completely gone. So you need to think of the bard really as a spellcaster. And I hate to say it, but don't let yourself be deluded by the presence of these proficiencies in some of these weapons and, you know, being like, oh, I start with expert perception and the wizard only starts with trained. I'm a fighter. You're really not. You're not a fighter. So what do we get? Well, as a bard, unfortunately, because you are a primary spellcaster, it means that you don't get a whole lot of abilities because spellcasting is most of what your class does. So just like everybody else, you're a spontaneous caster that uses occult magic. Spontaneous casting, pretty powerful in Pathfinder 2nd edition. So we really, really do love that. You get a spell repertoire just like everybody else. Now, you do pick a subclass, which for the bard is called your muse. Okay, and this is going to determine a couple of things about your character. There's the Enigma Muse, the Maestro Muse, the Polymath, and the Warrior. And the Warrior comes out of the APG. The Muse that you choose gives you a feat and adds 1 spell into your spell repertoire. So for example, if you're an Enigma Muse, you get the Bardic Lore feat for free. Remember, this is the same Bardic Lore that we have been getting for free since the very beginning of the game. But now it is a level 1 feat. And if your bard doesn't take this feat, you don't get it. The Enigma Muse picks it up for free, but if you don't get it, you don't get it. All right? The Maestro gains Lingering Composition feat, which when you go to make your when you use your composition cantrips, which you can spam at will, but they typically have a duration of 1 round, which means you're going to be using that spell every round. Lingering Composition is a feat, which gives you a focus spell, which you can use in order to try to increase the duration of those spells. So you're not stuck spending 1 action each turn casting your composition cantrips. You also had Soothe. Now, again, these are spells that you could take normally. You're like True Strike is a spell that is on the Bard's spell list. They can take that spell. This just gives this spell as a bonus to you for free. So you don't have to pick it out of your normal stuff. Same thing with Soothe. Soothe is a spell that you get for free. Polymath gains Versatile Performance feat and gains Unseen Servant. Let me tell you, between True Strike and Soothe, Unseen Servant, not quite the powerhouse that you might think it is. And Versatile Performance lets you use performance instead of diplomacy to make an impression, and instead of intimidation to demoralize. So you can just do everything with performance instead of the using diplomacy or intimidation. But quite frankly, you get a bunch of skill points anyways, and skill training. And I don't understand. You could just put all your ranks into performance. I guess it saves you some skill points. Lastly, Warrior. The Warrior gets to add fear to their spell repertoire. Now, this is the first thing that I think is very strange. Why doesn't the Warrior add True Strike and the Enigma add fear? I feel like those two things got flipped or reversed. Doesn't it make sense for you to have True Strike and for the Enigma to have fear? Anyways, you gain the Martial Performance feat, which lets you become trained in all martial weapons, but it doesn't increase your proficiency rank. When you get to level 11, you'll be, using all the martial weapons. But again, this does not make you a better fighter. It really doesn't. It lets you use a different weapon, which, has marginal utility. I'm not going to say it's not something useful, but it really doesn't make you a better warrior at all. Because at least the War Priest, for as much as we dog on the War Priest, okay, at least the War Priest gets their expert in Now, they don't get any higher than expert, but at least the War Priest gets expert weapon proficiency at level 7. They get it early. At least they get it early. right? The bard still doesn't get expert until level 11. I can't even begin to describe for you how painful, if you're trying to be some sort of warrior bard, how painful levels 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 are going to be. You are just never going to hit, ever. You're going to be so far behind, it's going to be painful. You'll gain a little bit at 11 when you get to go to expert and everybody else is expert. But then again, at level 13, now suddenly everybody's is going to be master. So you're going to just be immediately behind again. You know, and Pathfinder 2 has these weird things where it's like your character class might be totally valid. Like if you were a bard, obviously you can't start with an 18 strength because it's not your key stat. But if you were a bard who picked up this martial performance by going with the warrior muse, you could start with a martial weapon. You could start with a big two-handed sword or something cool, right? And your character, and you put a 16 into your strength, and you're feeling like I'm kind of, you know, everybody else is trained in their weapon. I'm trained in my weapon. I'm only +1 attack bonus behind everybody else. And for the first 4 levels of the game, you actually would probably feel like a pretty reasonably proficient combatant. Then you hit level 5 and now you suck. And each level that goes on beyond that, you just suck more and more and more. And then by the time you get into the teens, you really suck. And you're no longer able to function as a warrior in any way, shape, or form. And so it's, except for like maybe 2 brief levels at level 10 or 11, it's very strange how the design of the game works out that way. So these are our muses. And in addition to setting your, you know, feat, you get basically a free feat out of each of these. And again, if you are a maestro muse or a polymath muse or a warrior muse, you can't take bardic lore. Bardic lore is only for the enigma muse. Now there is a feat that you can take that lets you have multiple muses, but now you have to take that feat in order to have multiple muses, and then you have to take this feat to get bardic lore. So if you want your character to have bardic lore, you either have to be an enigma muse, or you kind of have to spend a feat tax and then another feat tax. That's 2 feats out of 10 that you get throughout the entire game just to get this thing that bards have had since the very beginning of the game. That is very disappointing. But bards, they get spells. They get a bunch of spells. They're trained in spell DCs. They go expert, master, legend, the same rate as everybody else. In terms of their raw abilities, they get a spell repertoire, and they begin with 1 composition cantrip. And composition cantrips are a special type of cantrip that only the bard gets access to. I'm sorry. This is a counter performance composition spell. There's 2 types of composition spells. There's composition cantrips and composition focus spells. And of course, these use your focus points like anything else. Very specific. They get this for free. All bards get this. So yay, we do get their ability to counter performance against an auditory performance. So, you know, we do have that going for us. Then outside of that, we don't really gain anything. Our features are, you know, we get skill increases, we get general feats, our saving throws increase, we get ability boosts, we get, you know, greater fortitude, greater will save. That's it. Like, we don't really gain anything at all. Like, we get it's just like a wizard. The only thing that we gain extra, but a wizard gets their signal, you know, they get their hand of the magi or whatever it's called, or they get their focus spell, and we get our focus spell. I mean, they really are just like a wizard, but with the occult. And you know, to that end, most of your power is in your spell casting capability. And again, I think it's important to note that you can, you know, you think of them as that. Damien says, multi-muse gives you the initial feat for free. Okay, Damien. So it's not a double feat tax. It's just 1 feat tax. But that is a good call out. Thank you, Damien, for that. So speaking of spells, unlike the sorcerer, but like the wizard, the cleric, and the druid, the bard is a one tradition class, which means that they only can use the occult class. So let's take, the occult tradition. So let's take a look at the occult tradition. This is, of course, from our all spells ranked. These are all of the S tier or higher spells that are on the occult spell list. And as we can see, there are 45 S tier spells or higher that are ranked, or 45 occult tradition spells which are ranked S tier or higher. This, by the way, is higher than any of the other traditions. I think Divine is 15. Primal is like 17. And I think Arcane is like 27. Oh, I didn't change it. Damn it. There we go. 32. Still highest. Thank you. Thank you, Oblivion Hold. Thank you. So sorry. There are 45. Maybe that's a better way to say it. There are 45 S tier spells in the entire game that we ranked. The occult spell list gets 32 out of the 45, which is higher than any other tradition, including Arcane, which is one of the reasons why I think occult. Now, granted, Arcane is still very powerful and overall has a better value of spells. But I think the occult tradition is extremely powerful. It contains some of the best spells in the game. Fear is, and its heightened version at level 3, is one of the best debuff spells in the game. Frightened is an amazingly powerful condition. Fear has an effect even when the person makes a saving throw successfully. It is a very powerful condition that helps all of your allies, both spellcasters and martial characters. Magic Missile is arguably the greatest it's ever been in Pathfinder 2. The multi-action magic missile, and as a sorcerer, as a spontaneous spellcaster, the bard will gain access to signature spell, which means you could take signature spell, Magic 1, and cast magic missiles all the way up through the course of the game. Cybersmith thinks their super chat was missed. Sorry, Cyber. Let's see. Cybersmith. First edition bards could trade lore away with archetypes. To be honest, he means Pathfinder first edition, could trade lore away with archetypes. To be honest, most Pathfinder second edition class feats exist, so the classes don't need all those Pathfinder 1 style archetypes to tailor. Right, but I hated Pathfinder 1 style archetypes anyways, and I thought like they made the game a complete and total utter mess. But I did like that the Pathfinder 1 bard did just get all of those core abilities. If you didn't use archetypes, they just got all those core abilities for free. And Damien is pointing out that polymath is the one you should really take with multi-muse. So, Damien, are you saying that multi-muse is a feat tax and that you must absolutely take it? So, yeah, they get an incredible array of spells. They get Soothe, which is not as good as Heal, but is still pretty damn good because Heal is just so busted. They get True Strike. They get Calm Emotions, which is honestly the closest this game has to an instant death spell. They get Fantastic Dispel Magic. Fairy Fire, which allows no save and is incredibly useful against invisible opponents. Hideous Laughter, which is a fantastic spell to shut people out. They get Invisibility. They get Heroism and Slow. They get Confusion, which is a fantastic, powerful spell. They also get some unique spells that are only in the occult list. Like, for example, Synesthesia, which in my opinion is the single greatest debuff spell in the entire game, because Synesthesia will make a creature clumsy 3 on a successful save. That's right. If the creature passes its saving throw against Synesthesia, it's still clumsy 3 for a round. That is so powerful, it's not even funny. And then eventually they get True Target, Maze, Nullify, Type Stop, and of course, Disappearance, the most busted spell in the game. So, Melissa, do those have spells ranked from Dark Archive? Dark Archive might have been out by the time we did this, Melissa. I'm not sure. Probably not the early levels of Dark Archive, but probably the later levels. One of the things that's on our infinite to-do list is to go back and rank all the spells that we missed. Cybersmith points out bards may struggle to trigger weaknesses. Fair enough. Although I think triggering weaknesses is really, really overrated in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. In my experience, when characters are dealing 80 to 90 to 100 plus damage with a critical hit on a melee strike, doing an extra 5 points of damage or 10 points of damage from a weakness isn't really worth the juice isn't worth the squeeze, as they say. I don't think it's a particularly worthwhile endeavor. I mean, if you got it, great. but I don't really obsess or focus on it. Now, your second point, Cybersmith, is well warranted, which is a lot of the spells of the bard do have the mental keyword. And so creatures that are immune to the mental trait might be a very, very strong counter to the bard. But in those instances, Cyber, what I would say is those are the combats where you just haste your party, cast heroism, or you haste your party and just spam inspire greatness or inspire courage, because you just help everybody else out and don't worry about, casting spells or debuffing anybody. Damien with $5 super chat says, no, it's not a feat tax. It's a great feat because the core book's first level abilities are all good, but the spells aren't equal. Fair enough. Right. Right. Let somebody else do the work. I mean, the bard is absolutely a support class first and foremost. GM Scott was distracted by our Discord, and they came in at this last moment. Thank you, GM Scott. By the way, as GM Scott rolls in here, we've been going for about an hour now. I'm going to take a drink real quick. As a reminder, if you're enjoying this video, maybe you're watching it on the VOD later, make sure to like. And if you want to see more of our content, subscribe and check us out. We come live Tuesdays and Thursdays. And if you want to show us some love, we got a couple different ways. You can join our Patreon, which would be awesome. If you're into Pathfinder 2nd Edition, if you're into role-playing games in general, if you want to learn more about this hobby and you want to talk with some really dedicated and awesome, cool folks, you might want to check out our Discord, which is a part of our Patreon, patreon.com/Knights-of-the-Last-Call. You also get other perks. I'm not even going to go into them. We're going to be starting our Northern Reaches Season 2 campaign here very shortly, so that'll be pretty sweet. It's a big Pathfinder 2 mega campaign. A lot of fun. But you can also throw us a tip or a super chat, or if you don't want to give us any money but still want to help us out, I have a link in the description below to our Drive-Thru RPG affiliate link. If you use that link, maybe you can click it and bookmark it. And if you're ever going to buy something from Drive-Thru RPG, just head over to that bookmark, click that Drive-Thru RPG bookmark. That's going to put you on the Knights of Last Call account. It doesn't cost you any extra money. It gives us a couple percentage points of whatever you buy from Drive-Thru RPG. It's not a lot, but it doesn't cost you anything. And if all of us were doing that, that might put an extra couple $100 a month into the Knights of Last Call's coffers. And that means we can do more prizes, more giveaways, more fun stuff for the studio. So definitely looking out for that. Flint, when does the Northern Reaches Season 2 guide come out? Well, Flint, the campaign guide is out. The only thing that we are waiting for is the Gazetteer and Atlas. Once the Gazetteer and Atlas release, the season will be launched. But right now, the campaign guide is out. I think it's someone could correct me, but it's like a 35 or 40 page PDF. But the Northern Reaches Season 2 campaign guide is out. So yeah, good spells. I mean, just fantastic spells. Some of the best buffing spells and debuffing spells in the game. And I'm a big fan of it. So really that, again, there aren't any other real abilities the bard gets. They only just get more spells and they get saving throw improvements, which is what everybody else gets. So the real question comes down to, we know the occult is a bomber spell list with some really powerful, great spells. Now, granted, you're missing primal. We know divine's the worst. Primal and arcane get some great ones, We know Fireball is a great spell. We know Wall of Stone is a great spell. We know Chain Lightning is a great spell. Absolutely. And I will be the first to admit that the bard does not get a lot of those big, fancy AoE, very overt damage type spells, or the big, huge, summoning walls of wind and summoning walls of stone. They don't get, their stuff is more subtle. And you do need to play into that. But, the bard does not have a ton of stuff. Isn't Magic Missile an occult? Yes, Bob, it certainly is. Magic Missile is absolutely an occult. Boom, right there. It is an arcane and occult only. But yeah, but again, you are a support caster. Magic Missile, don't get me wrong, can be a fantastic damage dealing capability. And the bard's ability to pull out Magic Missile when there's a monster that has a really high armor class, or it's incorporeal, or it's almost dead, but not quite. The bard can just rip out, just boo doo 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 doo, hit it with, 10 magic missiles or something crazy, or 9 magic missiles, and just blow it away. I mean, it's such a powerful ability to just have in your back pocket, and you can throw it on there as a signature spell and be really great. So we know the spell list is great. We know that their weapon and armor abilities are kind of lacking. We know that their saving throws aren't great. The wizard is worse, but but the bard is not much better. So the real question remains, how good are their feats? How good are a bard's feats? And this, to me, I don't necessarily know that they're extremely powerful, but I'll tell you this, I think they're fun. And I think they're very, very, very cool. And the reason why is I am a big fan of the bard's composition focus spells and composition cantrips. I think they are a fun way to use the 3-action economy in Pathfinder 2nd Edition and to reflect your bard's ability to influence the battlefield. And for me, nothing is more, sort of stands out as where is it? Somebody help me out. Where is Inspire? Here we go. You start off with the counter performance composition focus spell, and you get Inspire Courage. Now, what's really cool about this spell is it's a cantrip. You can cast it over and over and over again. And yes, it is. It only lasts 1 round, but it is a 60-foot emanation. It affects you and all of your allies. It gives you a +1 bonus to attack and damage rolls. It's free, but most importantly, it is 1 action. It's just a verbal action. And that is so cool because it means that your character can cast a spell and inspire courage. Your character, although I wouldn't recommend it, can move and attack and inspire courage. Making most of these composition and composition cantrips 1 action, I think was a brilliant decision by the game designers because I think it allows the bard to feel like they can get away with doing these things. And it's not just a fire and forget. It makes you feel like you are active and engaged. Now, yes, you're like, oh, I have to spam this every round. You don't have to, if the party isn't going to be attacking that round or there's not a lot of people in melee, then don't pump out your Inspire Courage. Or, as we kind of alluded to earlier, pick up Lingering Composition, either because you have a Maestro Muse or you pick up Multi-Muse, and that'll give you the Lingering Composition focus spell. And then when you cast your Inspire Courage, you make a performance check, and depending on how well your performance check goes, you might get that +1 bonus to last for 3 rounds or even 4 rounds. And even this is kind of like a nice throw at you. If you fail the performance check, your spell doesn't get anything, but guess what? You don't lose the focus point either, which means you can try to cast Lingering Composition again in the next round. Also, it's a free action to cast Lingering Composition. They were very generous to how they use, or how they stack the, the different thing, with the different composition abilities. They allowed the bard a bard can use Lingering Composition, which is a free action, to then cast Inspire Courage, and then still have 2 actions left, maybe 3 if they have haste, to move and cast a spell or, do something else. I think that is really, really, really fun and really, really, really cool. And I think that's, for me, probably the most fun part of being the bard is balancing all of these really, really cool composition spells that you get. In fact, if we go over to the bard's focus spell list, they get a very large list. Here are all their composition cantrips. Allegro, Dirge of Doom, Inspire Defense, I want to call out here. Gaining AC. Now, we've talked in this channel before about ways that you can gain to hit bonuses and the ways that you can lower an opponent's armor class. If you throw Synesthesia on an opponent, it's at -3 because of clumsy status. You flat foot that creature, whether because you're flanking it or you knock it prone, that's a -2. So now that creature's at -5 to their armor class. Throw a Heroism, or maybe one of our Inspire Courages, Inspire Greatnesses on a person, +3 to attack. I'll aid them. +4 to attack. Now you're +7 to hit against an armor class that's 5 lower. You will not find that for buffing armor class. There are like 2 spells in the game, Protection and Circle of Protection, that grant buffs to the armor class. There's one other one, which I think is a cleric spell. It's Holy Aura, and you have to sustain it. But Inspire Defense gives you a +1 bonus, status bonus to AC and saving throws, as well as resistance equal to half the spell's level to physical damage, as well as resistance to half the spell's damage. It's not a lot, but it affects everyone in a 60-foot radius. This is a absolutely fantastic defensive spell. It's one of the best spells in the game, and I think, honestly, this is probably one of the main reasons I would be a bard. I actually think this spell is probably, in some ways, possibly better than Inspire Courage, because +1 to AC is a big deal. And there's not a lot of things in the game that give you a status bonus to AC. Again, literally protection and circle of protection. That's really about it. So Inspire Defense is absolutely, awesome. And again, these are all just cantrips that you can cast over and over again. And by the way, look at this. One action, verbal, right? Oh, it's Allegro. This gives us AoE party haste. One action, right? One ally, sorry. Triple time. This is the AoE party movement buff. Now, I know what you're going to say. Oh, this doesn't stack with Long Strider or whatever. Yeah, I get it. It doesn't, because it's Pathfinder 2, right? The math is tight. They're not going to let the bard just stack on top of everything else. But if you have a bard and you're doing these things and you can help out everybody in the party with a +10 movement speed on a round where everybody needs to move quickly, that can feel very powerful and effective, and it doesn't feel like it's eating up your entire turn because it's just a single action. So yeah, the bard also can pick up as a feat at level 1. They can pick up the Hymn of Healing, which is their version of Lay on Hands, continuing to create the ironic thing, which is that like every class, like the druid, the champion, the bard, the monk, they all gain some sort of focus spell very early on, if not at level 1, that can basically spam heal someone to full, except the cleric. The cleric doesn't get a spammable focus heal. I think one domain gives you something that's a little bit okay, but Hymn of Healing, like Lay on Hands, is spammable heal. So the bard can be a very powerful healer, kind of eliminating the need for, lengthy medicine checks, especially at low levels where you have to wait an hour between. So very, very cool with their focus spells. Inspire Heroics takes that Inspire Courage and Inspire Defense to the next level. A critical success on Inspire Heroics can make your Inspire Defense bonus +3. That is a +3 status bonus to AC. Hell, the +2 on a success status bonus to AC, okay, to your party is the single greatest defensive ability in the game. I cannot express to you how favorable that changes things for the party. It is an insane buff. I almost consider Inspire Heroics to be like a feat tax, because like you kind of have to take this. To say nothing, by the way, of Inspire Courage being boosted up to +3 as well. But to be fair, Heroism, the spell, does the same thing as Inspire Courage does. It's going to use one of your spell slots, of course, but it does last for 10 minutes. And it scales, not quite the same, but it scales the same. You can get a +3 from Inspire Heroics long before you can get a +3 from Heroism. A +3 Heroism spell is a 9th level spell. That means you have to be 17th level to cast it. Whereas you could pick up Inspire Heroics at level 6 or 8, because it's actually a feat, and get the focus spell. And if you crit succeed, you could give someone a +3 bonus, status bonus, to attacks and damage rolls to attack rolls for one round to the whole party at level 8, which is huge. So I just think these are so fun, and some of them aren't really super powerful, but they're very, very, very flavorful. I love Dirge of Doom. Look at this, no save. Everybody's frightened 1, and they can't go below frightened 1. I mean, a bard could do a lot worse in their life than just casting a couple composition cantrips each round, right? I think there's a feat that lets you do that. I think it's called I think somebody was mentioning it before. Now, because you get all these feats and you want all these now to gain access to these composition spells, you need to take them as feats. most of the time. You know, triple time, oh, that really cool movement thing. Yeah, that is a feat. Oh, you want to take the healing thing? Yeah, that's a feat. Harmonize. Okay. Let's take a look at harmonize. By the way, let me change this because I hate that way of looking at it. There we go. I like the old way of looking at it. Yeah, here we go. Harmonize. Now, you need to have the Maestro Muse, but of course, like we said before, there is the feat, or there is the multifarious Muse, which you can take, which lets you pick up a different Muse type. So you can have multiple Muses. In fact, you can take this multiple times to have multiple Muses. I don't really recommend doing that. I think getting 2 is probably enough, but yeah. So let's take a look at harmonize. How do you spell harmonize? No. Okay. Okay, apparently it's no longer showing up. Oh, somehow we went to... Okay, stay classy, Archives of Nethys. It somehow went to just... there we go, harmonize. Okay, so it's one action, and you can perform multiple compositions simultaneously. If your next action is to cast a composition, it becomes a harmonized composition. Unlike a normal composition, a harmonized composition doesn't end if you cast another composition. So in EverQuest, which Aaron and I are both huge fans of, EverQuest 1, bards, I personally believe that the bard in Pathfinder 2 was almost singularly inspired by the bards of EverQuest 1. And the way that bards worked in EverQuest 1 is they had songs and other spellcasters had spell slots. But when it came to the composition stuff in Pathfinder 2, I think they were inspired by the EverQuest 1 bard. The bard had songs which they could cast for free, and it would go off every 6 seconds or so. And they could cast a healing song. They could cast a haste song. They could cast a buff song or debuff song. And you could only have one effect going at a time because it was like an aura. And when you switch it to a different aura, then that new effect would take over. But because the effect lingered for about 6 seconds, a bard player playing EverQuest 1 could quickly switch between different songs. And this is known as twisting. And this is what allowed a bard to cast essentially 2 or 3, or if they were really OP skilled, elite, 4 spells all within the cooldown cycle of the first spell that you cast. So that meant that a bard could keep 4 songs going at once. But again, they only lasted for a few seconds, and then the effect would end. So to me, composition cantrips are so cool because they remind me of that style of play. It's a very engaged style of play, and I feel like it's a very responsive style of play. A bard who has access to a lot of composition cantrips and composition focus spells is going to be able to round make these kind of cool tactical plans of how they want to spend their actions. I think that's really, really exciting because I don't think as a bard you feel priced into doing any of these things. Instead, you have some really amazing and great options to you. So harmonize lets you cast 2 composition cantrips. So baller. So now you can literally twist. And again, there's no, it's not once a day or it's not a focus spell. It's just an action. You can just do this over and over again. So a bard can pump out Inspire Courage and Dirge of Doom, giving their allies a bonus to hit while giving the enemies the frightened condition. So you are giving your party potentially a 2 or a 3 or a 4 point swing. That's insane. That's for nothing. It's not costing you any resources. You can do that all day, forever. That is great. So harmonize is awesome. But, as we're talking about this, so again, I know it started off sounding like maybe Derek didn't really like the bard because of how much they've changed away from it. But this is kind of what I'm getting. Damien's with a very accurate super chat says the bard is kind of the opposite of the champion. You want all the feats, and that is very true. As a bard, I wish I could take more feats. In fact, this is what I was kind of getting at. I wish the bard leaned away from spell slots. I don't want the bard to be casting spells all the way to 10th level like a wizard or a cleric or a druid. I don't see them as a spellcaster. I like them doing this stuff. This to me feels bardy. This to me doing counter performance, doing bardic lore, doing lingering compositions. This is the stuff that I think makes it really, really, really cool. Now, I see some people mentioning bard. Bard with, two people said bard with free archetype bard, bard with free archetype bard. The problem, I do want to talk about the bardic dedication. This is a big problem I have with the dedication. And the reason I know that I have this dedication problem is because Breck from our Tim's fighter from our Quest for the Frozen Flames games was a bardic dedication. And the problem with the bard dedication is archetypes. Here we go. Is fundamentally the bard's dedication is a spellcasting dedication in the sense that it is exactly the same as, you know, any of the other spellcasters. You start off, you get a muse, but it does nothing for you. You don't get any of the other abilities. You get 2 cantrips, and then there's a basic spellcasting, an expert spellcasting, and a master spellcasting, along with the breath feat, so that it doubles up from 1 to 2 on all of but your highest 2 spell slots. So this is exactly the same as the wizard, as the druid. What you gain is at level 8, you get inspirational performance feat, which gives you the inspire courage composition cantrip. At level 8, you finally can do like what bards do and have been doing since level 1. I think having to wait that, I get they want to protect the bard's niche and they don't want the archetype bard to just take over for it. But having to wait that long to get Inspire Courage at 8 is, I mean, it's still +1 to bonus to hit. It's cool, but it's just such a long haul. And because so much of the bard's feats and abilities some of the bard's abilities rely on them taking feats. Remember that you can pick up feats with your bardic multiclassing. Did I close that? You can pick up feats with your bard multiclassing using the basic Muses Whispers and advanced Muses Whispers. This will let you pick up feats. The problem is, we all know this, you're counted as half level. So that means that, you know, if you want to get a level 8 bard feat and pick up a really cool, song of marching or a company or call and response, you have to wait till your 16th level to take this ability. And I just feel like by the time you get to those levels, gaining some of these cool, powerful abilities just won't have the same impact and fun and excitement that it would have. Dirge of Doom at level 6 is awesome. Having to wait till level 12 to get a Frighten 1 effect when, you know, everybody for almost the cost of nothing can do AoE Fear at level 3. It's like, it just doesn't have the same impact that it does. And I get Archetype's a great system and they don't want to step on anybody's toes, but I feel that because the bards are so reliant on their feats for their abilities, and because of the way that bardic, that multi-classing works in Pathfinder 2, where you only count as half your level for purposes of meeting the bard's requirements, it's just a very high price to pay, and it's very tough. What the bardic dedication ends up really giving you is basically, delayed occult spellcasting. And again, the occult spell list is a great list. We talked about this, right? Like, look at all the S tiers. There's a lot of them. 32 of the 45 S tier spells are in occult. It's fantastic. But that's not what I want out of occult. Maybe give them, I saw somebody saying like maybe the bard should be more like the psychic, right? With a much more diminished spell slots, but instead picking up extra focus spells or extra focal abilities. I love that. I think that's a fantastic idea. I know a couple people said it, but I do want to say that it's pretty cool. All right, Cybersmith had a $5 chat, said, my internet connection falters, so I'll be departing, and I'll grab the VOD. But one final question. What are your thoughts on the social and exploration pillars for the Bard? Great question. I want to talk about one thing first. because I don't think those mean anything anymore. And the reason why I mean it is because there's no reason, like a fighter could take diplomacy, right? They could be trained, they could be expert, they could be master. A fighter can become legendary in diplomacy at the same level as anybody else, 15. All they have to do is put 4 skill increases into it. If their charisma is halfway decent, they've got a good item, they will have one of the best, if not the best, diplomacy in the entire game. Now, obviously, as a charisma key stat class, the bard is going to naturally be aligned with things like diplomacy, but only if they focus on it. And so, because in Pathfinder 2, anybody can kind of be anything, I don't necessarily know that the social tier is as important to them. But when you talk about the exploration, I do want to talk about bardic lore. Because I think this does give you a cool advantage, because bardic lore is kind of like esoteric lore, but you can only use it to recall knowledge. The problem is, and this is the problem I have with the entire ability. Now, lores are great because lores use a lower DC than standard recall knowledge. That's part of the rules of the game. And it's int based, which, to be fair, your bard isn't key statted in int, but the lowering of the DC and the fact that you can use this one skill for any recall knowledge in the game, the problem is you can't take it above trained until you have legendary proficiency in occult. And then it goes automatically only to expert, which, by the way, that's at level 15. So the bonus you get for it being lore is canceled by the fact that you can't raise it above expert. And even then, it can't go expert until level 15. This is so disappointing to me, because if there's anybody who should be like, oh, I know a little bit about that. I know something about that. Oh, I know something about that. Oh, I know something about that. It should be the bard, but this just doesn't really deliver. It delivers well at low levels when everybody is trained, and having lore in anything is really great. But by the time people are experts or masters, and you're only still trained, you're falling behind the 8 ball, and that is, very disappointing in that respect. That being said, most of the bard's feats, just like most classes' feats in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, are rated to combat. Hymn of Healing, combat. Lingering Composition, combat. Martial Performance, combat. Reach Spell, combat. Versatile Performance, the first one that we've said before. You know what? You get 3 skills for the price of 1. It's not that bad. Composition Contract, Composition Spell, Area Shaping, combat. Inspire Competence, combat. Well, I guess you could get the skill bonus. Is this one good? So this lets you aid with performance. And if you roll a failure, you get a success instead. So this actually isn't that bad. This is actually pretty good. So this can help you with exploration, right? The bard can always be spamming this out when people are taking skill checks and stuff. Yeah. And if you roll a failure, you get success set. And if you're legendary, you automatically critically succeed. By the way, by the time you're legendary in performance, you're going to automatically succeed anyways. So yeah, I mean, the bard definitely has some abilities that they can help out with, in that area of the game. But overall, I think it's still pretty much a combat focused class. I don't necessarily know that they really gain a lot of feats or abilities that really help them too much with the exploration or social pillars. I want to catch up on what some people have said here in chatting. Abuela says, harmonize with Inspire Courage and Dirge of Doom, and then throw in a Greater Invis. That's insane. That's pretty sweet. Yes. Talking about twisting and EQ, EverQuest Carpal Tunnel Bard. Yes. Josh Jurgensen, great point. Arguably, illusions have never been better in and out of combat. I agree with you. Pathfinder 2, because it kind of has a rule for everything. Illusions have always kind of been like wishy-washy, and it really depended on how your GM ruled them to be how effective they were. Myself as a GM, Aaron as a GM have always been very, very favorable for illusions. Pathfinder 2nd edition has pretty strong rules about illusions. They basically go out of their way to say they don't get a save unless they're really interacting with it. And they can't just like, I just disbelieve it, And again, the occult spell list does have a lot of illusions. And in fact, I don't think it's S tier, Josh, but I'm pretty sure. No, yeah, look, like illusory creature is S tier. So, an illusion spell made it all the way to S tier. So that actually, and I think a lot of the other illusion spells were very high tier. I think they were level A's and, maybe B's, but there were a lot of A's. So, I mean, definitely illusions are very, very strong. So yeah, I agree with Shadram. I think a bard that functioned like the psychic would be really interesting, for sure. Let's see. Ayla says, agree 100%. Bards should focus on weaving abilities together in artistic, perhaps rhythmic way, not vomiting locusts out of their mouth. It's so weird to me that they cast spells at all. And I got to be honest with you, after everything that we said tonight about the history of the bard, I wish they had removed spell casting from the bard in Pathfinder 2nd edition. I wish they had taken the bold step of making them just a focus and cantrip class. They could still be a spellcaster, but only composition cantrips and composition focus spells. I think that would have been awesome. And I think that would have been it would have made them feel, and then again, give the occult primary 1 to 10 occult class, make that the witch, or the warlock or whatever we want to call it, with all the weird occult abilities. And then you can make the occult tradition really weird and evil and dark and psychic and strange, without having to worry about also throwing in random bard songs there's spells that are on the occult list that don't even feel occulty. They feel very bardy. And it's like you could take all those spells out of the occult tradition, give them to the bard as focus spells or composition cantrips, and then make the occult list kind of custom tailored for like a warlock witch type primary build. And I think that would have been a lot better, for sure. Tygon says, I made a character for one of my players that was a sentinel dedication, 16 strength with a whip, and he tripped dragons. It was awesome. Okay. I'm trying to wonder. I mean, dragons, I don't know what dragons' reflex saves are, but if their reflex saves aren't good, they are going down. How heavy are you? Irrelevant. It's your reflex save that determines how hard it is to trip you. Ryan says, give him a lot of cantrip spells that interact almost like single action bard cantrips or musical notes. Oh, Ryan, like, yeah, my ideal system of a bard would be like literally tied to like almost an element of music where, like if you use one cantrip, it like is a note. And now if you use like the next note in the sequence, it gives you like an additional benefit. Like, I think that would be like so cool and awesome. And like, it's like, you could literally like each time you're playing, the circumstances of the combat are like almost forcing you to like create a new song. I think that would be so awesome because like someone mentioned earlier on, there's no doubt that, what we perceive as the bard in some part was regarding music is tied to the idea of Tolkien. And in the deep lore of Tolkien, in the Silmarillion, the music of the Ainur is what Eru Iluvatar uses to create the world. It's literally music that brings the world into creation. And the echoes of these words and these songs of creation sort of echo through the world of Tolkien. And I think that mythology or that concept is very much present in a lot of our precepts of fantasy gaming. And you even see that terms used, the song of creation, words of creation. It gets used in quite a few campaign settings, Forgotten Realms being one of them. The idea that the bard isn't casting magic, but the idea that music, any music, is sort of a signpost or a pathway to tapping into that primal words of creation, that primal music of the Ainur, and that they are able to bring forth this miraculous abilities because they're able to just, produce this music, which is so pure and so powerful. I think that is so much cooler to me than even just casting occult spells, certainly vomiting swarms. So that's the kind of, that's the kind of bard I would have liked to see. And we didn't get that. We did get a great class because occult is a great tradition and the bards get full access to it. Yeah, they're no longer combatants at all, but it's Pathfinder 2. You can't have everything, but they get some really great feats. I mean, really, really fun feats. I mean, just, we've gone through this class before where I say, like a fighter at level 1, most people wouldn't want any of those feats except for like sudden charge, maybe. Like, do I want bardic lore? Yeah, it falls off, but it's still really cool. Do I want hymn of healing? Yeah, it's awesome. Do I want lingering composition? Absolutely, I want lingering composition. All right, I don't really care about martial performance. Do I want reach spell? Most casters do. Do I want versatile performance? Sure, why not? I get to diplomacy with performance. I get to intimidate with performance. That's fantastic. I don't even know what this one does, but that's 5 feats that I want, and that's just from level 1. By the time we get to level 2, yeah, I would love Inspire Competence. I would love Lore Master's Attitude. I would love Multifarious Muse to pick up another Muse so I can pick up more feats, right? I don't even know what this one does, but I bet it's cool. So, like, that's 10 feats I want already, and I've only get 1 because you're a spellcaster. You don't get a feat at level 1. You only get a feat if you're a human or from your Muse selection. So, it's a tough class because you're going to want a lot of that stuff. You're going to want a lot of that stuff. Just dump skill feats into additional lore, broken ass skill feat. Yeah, additional lore, by the way, is sleeping on it. It's probably like the strongest skill feat in the game. It auto increases. It's awesome. I love it. Ryan says, this is why I think granted background lores should progress like the additional lore feat. Agreed. Actually, my house rule is that the bonus skill training you get from your intelligence bonus. So if your int is 18 and you have 4 bonus skill, if your int is 14 and you have 2 bonus skills, that you can only use those intelligence bonuses to take the additional lore feat. So someone with a 16 intelligence wouldn't start with 3 additional skills at trained. They would start with 3 instances of the additional lore feat. So they have to be a lore, which means they have to be intelligence based, which means it has to be like knowledge and, being a smarty pants. And it also means that actually is useful because they're going to auto scale, which I think is really, really cool and important. It also means that if you bump your int later, instead of getting a useless new skill at trained, which basically is useless, you'll get an additional lore feat, which will auto scale to the right level of proficiency, which I think is really, really cool. Hey, we got a super chat from Evan. Evan says, hey, Derek, hey, finally catching a stream again. Wanted to thank you for letting us add spell rankings to the daily spell discussion post at r/Pathfinder RPG. Sweet. I didn't know we allowed you to do that. Very, very cool. Maybe Bob will let us do that. Yeah, listen, Evan, we have some contentious spell rankings in there. But now that you mentioned it, I do think I did see that. Over there at r/Pathfinder. Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. I was like, I don't think I did that, but Bob did. Okay, great. But yeah, Evan, I think what you're highlighting here is an important part. My rankings are not the end of the conversation. It's the beginning of the conversation. I give a ranking and you say, wow, that's higher than I would give it. It's lower than I would give it. Let me go watch the video and see why they are grading the spell that way. Is that the way I think about the game? No, I think about the game differently. Interesting. Why do you think about the game that way? And now we're having a conversation, which is really what Reddit is all about. It's what our Discord is all about. It's what our Patreon is all about, is having discussions. So yeah, being an aid to get discussions going is exactly what the intent of that whole process and that whole project were. Michael Horton says, every house rule Derek comes up with is brilliant. Thank you. Is there a master list of this wisdom that the sage can pass to the rabble? I do not have a master list, Michael. I kind of just sprout nonsense and sometimes my patrons write it down. But I'm sure if we probably worked with the patrons, we could probably come up with a complete master list of Pathfinder 2 house rules that I have or things that I would change or improve, but that might be a worthwhile project. Some of them didn't work out so well. I'll be the first to admit. The original Derek's Hero Points. Well, okay, I take that back. The original Derek's Hero Points, which automatically upgraded a failure to a success and a success to a critical success, were fine because in my Rise of the Rune Lord campaign, you didn't get automatic hero points. You had to earn them. You didn't get them at the beginning of the session like you do normal hero points. And you only earn them through big damn hero stuff. So I wanted them to be this sort of more long-term resource that people could really, really cash in. They only really became broken is when I allowed people in the audience, when we were live, to tip, to give their favorite PC hero points. And people fucking gave us a lot of money, way more money than I ever expected they would give us in order to give their favorite, Knight of Last Call, an extra hero point to go be badass and go be awesome. So I would say that my style of hero points, don't just use it in the dark. You got to also use it the way I used it, which is to say, you did not gain them automatically. You did not start off each session with 1. If you went to 0, you were at 0 until big damn heroics, and then I would award you 1. So, but thank you, Michael, for the kind words. Well, in Tolkien, Bard was just the name of the guy. To be clear, as a kid reading Tolkien and also being introduced to D&D at the same time, that shit was really confusing to me. Badoom, obviously channeling their inner Pathfinder 2 Bard. I picked this up in Bard College. Vomits locusts. Frostjack says, it always frustrated me when I saw GMs poo-pooing on illusions. They're always super fun, in my opinion. Forgot about YouTube censor. Absolutely, Frostjack. And in fact, illusions, one of the reasons I rated them so highly in Pathfinder 2nd Edition is because they're one of the few instances of spells that kind of still allow you a lot of freedom and really, in some ways, rely on the GM's and the player's ability to sort of be creative and, convince your GM, hey, I think this would be a good idea. And like, it really gives you, like, you get a lot of flexibility and versatility by even just taking 1 or 2 illusion spells, because they're not locked into what they can do. They can do anything. You could make an illusion of a dragon. You could make an illusion of a stone wall. You could make an illusion. I remember one time, this is D&D 3rd edition, our low-level party was making their way to the dungeon, and the GM, Aaron was the dungeon master. He rolled a random encounter, which was a zombie wyvern. I think we were like level 1 or 2. A zombie wyvern was like CR 6 or 7. And it was flying far away, but it's a zombie. It's not super paying attention, but you can imagine this decrepit beast with, holes in its wings, and its, guts are hanging out, but it's flying around being a zombie looking for human brains or brains to eat. And I figure, well, it's a zombie. And I used a simple silent illusion to create, we were in sort of an area on the plains with like a bunch of rocky hillocks and stones. And I made an illusion of a boulder, just like a boulder you would see out like on a rolling slope. And we all hid in the illusion. And Aaron just said, yeah, you know what? There's no reason it would disbelieve this. It looks like a big rock in the middle of a field with a bunch of other big boulders. It flies on past you. And like that to me felt like such a win, and felt such like an earned win, because it was me using my character's abilities. It's not like I was just making bullshit up. I was using my character's spells. So I was tapping into the game mechanics, but I was also using my creativity and my ideas. And so it felt like a really good, merging or melding. And I always thought that was really, really, really fun. Very, very, very satisfying. Let me swatch over to this real quick while we're going through this. Shadram says minstrels in the Lord of the Rings Online are a bit like that. They have major and minor chord abilities, which are major buffs and minor harms. Building chains that you end with codas, which do big heals and damages. I mean, we get... There are things that you can do in a video game that become a little bit tedious and a little bit tiresome in a RPG, tabletop RPG. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the kind of stuff I think would be really fun and really, really cool. Let's see. Can you linger and harmonize a composition? As far as I know, you can't because of meta magic rules. That probably sounds correct, because lingering composition says if your next action is to cast a cantrip composition. Well, if you'd use that, your next action would be to harmonize, which is not a cast. And harmonize says if your next action is to cast a composition, and lingering composition, despite being called lingering composition, does not have the composition trait. So no, you cannot. You cannot linger and harmonize at the same time. So you are correct, Dead Meat. KC says Battle Cry, if it ever came out. I'm sorry. Listen, Northern Reaches is out, and then Battle Cry is our absolute next focus. Absolutely. Bartending lore is a classic. Absolutely. Glad to know that bards are good at using illusions. In first edition, whenever I would use a bard would use an illusion, the DC was so low, the enemy would always instantly succeed. And again, the rules for illusions in Pathfinder 2 are much more favorable to the players. So, Mark says, I'm still not convinced they're not dumb. Having said that, we have a goblin bard in our game. He was great, but mostly just comic relief. Well, I mean, goblins are kind of, their abilities, like they can bounce and stuff like that, kind of makes them automatically caught up. Kind of. Now, I will say this. To me, the bard is a weird class. It is, because it's like it's like a fighter, but it's not anymore. And it's a spellcaster, but it gets these musical abilities. The class, as we've seen, has changed in almost every edition of the game. It started off as a fighter, then it became like a early version of a prestige class, then it was like a rogue, then it was like a full spellcaster, and it's always had this sort of music ability randomly tacked onto it. I'm not going to lie to you and say that it's really, really odd. And I think a lot of people, and I know this is true for me and Aaron, have always wanted the bard to be more like a red mage from Final Fantasy. That's really kind of what I want. I want a class that's like the adventurer class. But then the bard abilities don't really seem to fit well with the red mage. I feel like they should split the bard into two different classes. I think the old concept of the bard, which is like the fighter, which dabbles in some roguish stuff and some magic, should be kind of parsed out as the D20 version of the red mage. And then they should take all the music abilities and the buffing and the healing and the tapping into the song and all the sort of diplomatic elements of it and make that into the bard class. And I think they should split those two out. Mike says, for Battlecry 3 in August 22, trademark, of course, may I recommend a homebrew rogue racket called Bard? I don't think I would want the Bard to be a racket under rogue. I think the rogue and the bard fundamentally are different concepts. So I mean, there's sometimes where I think the swashbuckler should just be an archetype that maybe a fighter picks up or a rogue picks up, but I don't think the bard quite fully fits that. I'd like for the bard to be something on its own. Princess Salami says, so fully splitting the skald and the minstrel. Yeah, exactly, Princess Salami. And I like the idea of this, kind of jack of all trades class, but I feel like that could be separate from the idea of this musical spellcaster. And I don't think those two things need to be overlapped anymore. I think we can have them be different things. And, when you look at the bard today, all those old concepts of being a fighter and being a rogue are kind of mostly forgotten, Captain. The captain himself is speaking. Bards have always been weird to me when it comes to music. Why not a storyteller, poet, or insult comic? Well, I think that comes back, Captain Phipps, to the idea of the power of rhythmic song, right? And that idea of that primal music of creation. Because they're not just, right? They're not just, right? In real life, people give speeches and people get inspired, right? In Pathfinder, we have the Inspire Courage spell. But in real life, people could give speeches and, inspire courage in people. And there's no magic involved. But with the bard, it is magical in nature. So to me, I think that kind of leans towards music more than, say, storytelling or insult comics. So I think your point's well taken. I think that's where it really comes from. Ryan says the druid subtype bard. No, I'm okay with bards not being. In fact, actually, like I said, if it was up to me, it might be too powerful, but if you were going to give the bard any, I would have the bard be, a soft combatant, and this is in Pathfinder 2, so I would be disappointed, but I would have the bard be like able to pick up, like, they would only have like 1 or 2 spell slots per level, but they could kind of like cherry pick from different traditions or something, or have something like where it's like they learn this on the road, they learn this something. If they want to pick up a primal spell, awesome. Like, why does your bard know fireball? You're like, well, once I spent a whole summer living with a commune of elven druids and their leshy familiars, and that year, I learned that the forest had overgrown and their fire and they needed fire magic in order to keep back. And I learned that fire is an important part of the primal cycle. And they taught me their ways, and now I know fireball. It's like, oh, how do you know vomit swarm? That's funny that you should ask. I had managed to work my way into the employment of a very strange fellow who was obsessed with bugs and worms. And while I was working for him, I think that idea of like every spell you have has a story. Yeah, princess. This one time at bard camp, right? Like every story the bard should start with this one time at bard camp. Exactly. I think that's really awesome. Frostjack, did you ever see the Scald's 4E Essential class? I probably did, but I probably immediately skipped it because it was Essentials, even if it was Adu. But I do not remember that class well enough to offer any thoughts on it at all. Mark asked, what did I think of Chris Pine's bard from the Dungeons and Dragons movie? Good. I liked it. People were upset that he wasn't a spellcaster. I loved that he wasn't a spellcaster. I thought it was great. Obviously I thought he was kind of silly and hokey and jokey, and I liked the idea of the bard being a little bit more, spiritual in a weird sense. But I actually liked Chris Pine's character. I thought that idea of that character was really, really cool. He felt like an adventurer to me, and I enjoyed it. That was one of the characters that I enjoyed actually quite a bit. Emperor Epic says, I made a bard and their inspire courage ability was writing the epic narrative of the fight that was happening, describing the party's epic actions as they fight. That reminds me of Order of the Stick, where the bard just it's a comic book, but like he's always just like saying what he wants the people to do. And so it's like, like the comic shows them jumping over a pit, and then, he's got a little speech bubble with like music notes on it. And he's like, jump, jump, jump over the pit. And then eventually like they come across an ogre, and the rogue leans over to the fighter and she's like, let me handle this. And the ogre's like, 100 gold to pass. And the rogue goes, we paid yesterday. Don't you remember? And then the bard goes, bluff, 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 the stupid ogre. And then, they have to run away because the ogre attacks them. But I did think that was, pretty funny. Damien says, so your bard interned at Paizo. Exactly. Exactly, Damien. Unfortunately, yes, they did. So let's see. Daniel says, so a bard with Magus level combat abilities and only composition and focus spells. Yeah, something like that, Daniel. I don't even know if it needs full Magus level combat abilities. Honestly, Daniel, one of my complaints in the game is that we don't have anything between, like, ignore fighter. We get classes that go to master, and that's like what the game is based around. And then everybody else caps out at expert. And that's like spellcasters, wizards, witches, right? And that's it. That's the distinction between being a full martial character is to get a +6, level +6, and to be I've never touched a weapon in my whole life is level +4. It's very weird, right? Like it's such a small difference. And so it doesn't give us any wiggle room for, the other character classes. I, Daniel, would like to see the other classes get to legendary weapon proficiency later. I think barbarians and champions and monks and whatever should get to legendary weapon proficiency. Maybe they don't get it 13 like the fighter. That's still the fighter's jam. But same way that the war priest gets to expert, but 2 levels later, I would be fine with the other martial characters getting to legendary weapon proficiency just later on. And that would free up the game space to allow war priests or maybe bards to go to master later on as well. And you could still keep the witches and the wizards at expert for the whole game. And then now you have sort of a better intermediary, and you also eliminate the fighter being OP problem. So that's what I would change. Exactly, ZB. I actually was going to say that, but I didn't want to bring up 3rd edition again. Right. At the 20th level, a wizard had a BAB of 10 and a fighter had a BAB of 20. And that is a huge fucking difference. But Derek, the niche protection, you can't give not fighters nice things. How would you even RRP? Exactly. The other option, Ryan, is more levels of proficiency. Ryan, I really love that idea because in Derek's world, I would love for there to be trained, expert, master, legendary, and mythical or mythic, right? And a mythic could be plus 10. And I just think the idea of going to plus 10 in a system that is already based around a 10-point swing just feels so cool. And yeah, maybe the fighter doesn't get mythic, until level 19, and they only get it in one, weapon group. But like, that is really, really cool. I think that's really awesome. Now, Ryan, I like your idea even better because what Ryan is saying, if you go back to Pathfinder 2 beta, proficiency, the difference between proficiency was only 1 point. So trained was 1, expert was 2, master was 3, legend was 4. And then you could have this mythic at 5. And now the difference has shrunk even more. I love it. That sounds awesome. So yeah, that is something I would like to experiment with and play with. Emperor Epic says the whole proficiency system feels very unexplored since it's on rails. It feels strange how it gets framed as the choice that you made. Right. It's not. In fact, one of the reasons why I think one of the safety valves of Pathfinder 2 is by having the feats not really affect you numerically. Sorry. By having the feats really not change any of your numbers, the core chassis of your class, your proficiency progression in saves, in armor, in attack bonus, in spell DC, those are all locked in based on your class that you chose. It never changes, ever. Even if you take a different archetype. Even if I was a wizard who used every single feat that I ever got to take fighter dedication, my character would have the saves, armor, and weapons proficiencies of a wizard. So that is something that it does feel like you're pretty real locked in. And I think they do that because they have to maintain the balance. I think that things could get, out of way, could get crazy. They could get out of pocket is what I'm saying. All right. Well, it's past 9:00. So we're probably going to start wrapping up. I don't know if anybody, we can obviously ask any questions. By the way, if anybody has any questions or anybody wants to ask anything, feel free to do so. I will make one last, sort of plug or reminder to say thank you for watching the channel. We appreciate your patronage. We appreciate your viewership. Remember to like, comment, maybe subscribe if you want to get notified anytime we go live. We got some interesting, cool things coming up here in the future for Knights of Last Call. We've been kind of on a Pathfinder 2 kick, but we'll probably take a break for a little bit to go back some of our older videos. We also are going to have our studio done. In fact, it could potentially be done this week because Saturday, I'm going to post this in the Discord for our patrons. Saturday is Bob's birthday, and Bob has asked me to run for him and some of his friends a one shot of something simple. Some of these people aren't really RPG experts. And Bob said, hey, do you think we could do it at the studio and live stream it for my birthday? And could we include drinking in some capacity? So we might be doing that this Saturday. We might be playing from the studio and on Bob's birthday with alcohol. with some friends of his. Smith's going to be there. Bob's brother Danny, if you remember from Rise of the Rune Lords early on, Lord Villic, the monk, the goblin monk. Another one of Bob's friends who has not been on the channel, who's not been on the show. There was a universe where he could have been, but he bowed out before we started playing games. We might be live on Saturday from the studio. It remains to be seen if it'll be viewable only to our patrons, or if it'll be widely broadcast. But we are hoping to we're hoping that we can get that ready. If we can, it's going to happen. But anyways, subscribe and click the bell, because you want to be notified if we do something like that on Saturday or any of our other streams. And of course, Casey says drinks plus casuals might need to be a private video. I don't disagree with you, Casey, at all. So it'll probably be a Patreon, especially because as GM Scott says, it's like a beta test of the studio. So, we're going to probably have some technical glitches, that'll probably come up. And it's nice to be able to do that with our friends and our support. And if you want to be part of our community and you want to throw us some of your support and you want to check out some of the cool bonus videos that we have available, our Discord, be part of some of our community games. If you come in at the $10 level, you might, want to sign up for Northern Reaches Season 2 here in the next week or two. All of those things are part of the Knights of Last Call Patreon. Patreon.com/Knights of Last Call. Check us out. We got a couple different tier options. All of them get you into our private Discord where you can talk Pathfinder 2. You can talk Blaze in the Dark. You can talk Powered by the Apocalypse. You could talk anything RPG related with a very, very fervent, respectful, and amazing group of your fellow RPG fans. So, simple game. Fate. I don't think I'm going to do Fate. It's possible, but I don't think I'm going to do Fate. Well, we're not going to play Red Dragon Inn or Munchkin. It's going to be a role-playing game. It's going to be a one-shot. KC says, when is the combat and tactics spellcasting video dropping? Great question, KC. You guys did support that. I did edit it. So the content is edited. I just need to add the graphics to it. So there's parts where we're referring to different page numbers or different layouts, and I need to go in and add those to the nonlinear editor. So I'll probably work on that probably this weekend, and probably get that out, this week. So, editing, as like anything, it took me so long just to edit it the first time. And like our other videos, by the way, the combat and tactics spellcasting video is going to have two videos. One is going to be the public video, and then there's also going to be a Patreon bonus video, which is available to our Knights, $5 Knight members or higher. So there's actually going to be two videos, the regular YouTube video and the bonus video. As we do. John says Easy D6. Yeah, Easy D6 is pretty good. The short list is like Dungeon World or a Dungeon World hack like World of Dungeons or Adventure World or Homebrew World or any of those very stripped down versions. World of Dungeons is a personal favorite of mine. That's one option. Index Card RPG is another one that I think could be quick and fun and simple and easy to play. The other one I might play is a fantasy hack of Lasers and Feelings. If you don't know these games, you can go look them up, but I might do a fantasy hack of Lasers and Feelings as well. I don't know Tiny Dungeon well enough. Bob owns it, but I actually don't own Tiny Dungeon, but I don't know it well enough to do it. All we need is a short 4-hour stream about Forbidden Lands. Deathbringer, Professor DM's game. Yeah, I mean, that is obviously extremely simple, along with like Knave as being like super simple. Part of what I want to do though, John, is highlight some of the advantages to playing a non-traditional D20 style game. As a dungeon master, I feel very empowered when I'm playing, let's say, a PBTA game, to be able to kind of go with the flow and use those 7, 8s, and 9s to create interesting moments, which I think can lead to really fun gameplay. So I'm not discounting that, but yeah. The other thing is too, is like, I want something that we can, okay, Easy D6 then. Yeah, Easy D6 is not a bad option either. I like easy D6. Total newbies, let BX them, or we could play old school essentials and let them suffer as we did. We could do that. I mean, there's a fun option. Really, though, kind of what I'm looking for is a system that I can use to easily figure out a way to incorporate drinking into it. And I think I have a couple of ideas that people can like trade in their empties for a bonus. Giving them dice with crayons. Yeah, you have to fill it in. Otherwise, you can't see it. Funnel. No Dungeon Crawl Classics. No funnels. No thank you, Evil. Bob should know that one. I don't know if Bob ever picked that up, but that is a fun game for kids. Reagan had a question. What are your thoughts on multi-class dedications with Bard? 2 feet starve, or is something like Champion going for Glimpse of Redemption worth making the dip? I like the Bards feats too much to ever really want to dip out of it, to be honest with you. But, you know, if you're okay missing out on a couple Bard feats to gain something else, I don't think that's a bad idea. Maybe get Deadly D8 to edit. The other one was Chef's Kiss. Well, Casey, that Deadly D8 video that he edited, that was on his channel, and he did that. He reached out to us and said, hey, do I have your permission to use your video and shorten it up and add some animations to it? And we said, yeah, absolutely, go ahead and do that. But I think Deadly D8 is I think he's basically working for the rules lawyer now. I'm not 100% sure. I haven't been over to his channel in a long time, but I know he's always on the rules lawyer stream now. So, but you know, obviously we're fans of that whole crew over there, and we love that video that they made. Boopy says empties for advantage. Yeah, you know, something like that, you know, cash in an empty or do a shot to gain advantage. Again, I whatever game system I play, I want it to be simple and easy and quick. I want it to be something that can work fundamentally in a short period of time.
$25.
Hey!
Thanks for giving me something to watch on a Thursday night. Here's to the next one.
Thank you, Zerias. Very strong. Really appreciate that. Between that tip and our super chats, we're up to $100, and that's always a great milestone for us to be able to hit. So thank you for that. And yeah, I mean, these have been a lot of fun. We've gotten a lot of views from these. We've gotten a lot of interaction. We've hopefully picked up some new patrons as well between our rogue, barbarian, and now bard. Our patrons will probably vote probably next week to see what the next one is. Like I said, we might take a week off. I don't want to get into the habit of where we just every week grind, because that's kind of what we have done in the past, and it can start to weigh on me a little bit and maybe weigh on you as well. So we might take a break or two, but we'll be back, and we'll have a lot more Pathfinder 2 classes to talk about. I think that's really interesting. GM Scott says, if not a character funnel, then probably a beer funnel, right? Because there might be a time limit on how much you can drink. And that'll be the bonus that you gain. You know, like we'll weigh the beer, and then the delta between what the beer weighs after you're done drinking it and what it weighed at the beginning, that's the bonus to your attack roll. But you only have 10 seconds. John says, not bad though to get ready for Northern Reaches of season 2. Doing these classes, I know nothing, and you're teaching me. Well, John, that is what we're here to do. And also remember, John, you know, people in our Discord are fantastic experts at this game. They've put in thousands of hours. Some of them played and GM for thousands of hours or hundreds of hours, close to 1,000 hours, just in Northern Reaches season 1. So some people have really, really become unbelievable masters and experts at this game. And yeah, you know, I think it is a fantastic resource. Right, John. Right, you'd be like, hey, I want to be a dwarf. Okay. God, I want to be a wizard. No. Dwarf you're just a dwarf. You're just a dwarf. That is the only thing. It's your class. Although we do like because it's Bob's birthday. Bob loves dwarves. We do love the idea of everybody's a dwarf. We thought that would be pretty funny. Oh, Derek, where were you 30 years ago? I would have played that game. Well, yeah, that's a game I don't even know that I'm up for playing now. You know, Bob was originally like, oh, not too much drinking. I've got to go to like my family's birthday party the next day. And I'm like, look, I didn't force him to drink. Okay. It was his fault. He just rolled badly. We'll try to avoid everybody dying of real life death on our very first beta stream from the studio. But again, it's really going to come down to tomorrow. Earlier this week, I ordered close to $1,500, maybe $1,600 in one of the last batches of microphones, lights, mounts, grips, cables, modifiers that we need in order to sort of finish up studio version 1.0. And that all came in. I've got like $1,500 of audio-visual equipment sitting in the trunk of my car, which I need to take up to the studio, possibly, actually, once this stream ends. So again, I cannot stress this enough. We would not be doing this if it not for the support of viewers like yourself who are tipping us and super chatting us and signing up for our YouTube membership and joining the adventure and our massive, incredible, and amazing Patreon. The $3 or $5 or $10 or $25, or some of you even more, that you donate to us every month is what allows us to make these kind of cool investments to try to bring this kind of fun and interactive game to everybody. And, you know, we're not the biggest channel in the world, but I like to think that Knights of the Last Call offers something unique. It offers a much more direct and personal experience, even during our live streams. Chat is obviously a huge part of what we're doing here. As Ayla says, we'll finish the studio even if it kills us. And we really like to, give back and participate with our community. We go to conventions. We're trying to set up a night con so that we can actually have our own convention. We're driving across, me, Bob, and Aaron are going to drive across the country so that we can give one of our patrons a custom homemade gaming table that we're going to build for them. And we do this because we love this community and we love being part of this community. And we didn't make a YouTube channel to make a YouTube channel. We made a YouTube channel because we like games and we like talking about games. And we wanted to find more people who feel the same. And we have. And we've built this amazing, incredible community. Very, very proud of that no matter what happens. I will always be thankful for that. GM Scott says, Derek, I feel so bad. I killed 3 players last night. Oh, you mean characters? No. I killed the players. You're right. I didn't say I don't want to kill my players on the first night. If the writer's strike had happened 8 months ago, I could have probably hired all that stuff for cheap. But Casey, then I wouldn't have the pleasure of having learned it all and done it all myself. All right. So we're going to wrap. Again, I will let folks know about Saturday. Again, 90% sure it'll be on the Discord. Private to the Discord patrons only. I should say private to the patrons only, just because, it's a little bit, it's a fun time for all to be had. Nightwood channel when building the table. Well, once we finalize the design, right now we're working on trying to decide the size of the television that should be mounted inside the table. Laughing Out Law and I have been going back and forth a little bit on that. Once we actually begin construction of the table, we'll definitely make a couple videos highlighting the construction of the table so that you guys can all see that and be part of that process as we build the table. It could be interesting if you have any interest in wood crafting, furniture making, that kind of thing. But also the gaming element of it as well. Just the design and why I design tables the way I design them, specifically in mind with playing RPGs at them. And how that impacts the decisions that I make in terms of the size of things, the spacing of things, the whole 9 yards. And of course, obviously, when we actually do go to deliver it and we road trip across the country, we're going to be doing live streams along the way and hopefully having really fun, awesome meetups with people as we drive across the country. Ryan says, I have a cool idea for the musical bard cantrip master. Have 3 traits: chorus, bridge, and verse. Treat bridge similar to the flourish trait and allow the other 2s to supplement and enhance. I think any sort of like leaning into the music and making it kind of a puzzle for the bard to have to figure out and be able to find cool ways to combine and mix and match their different abilities, I think is really cool. And I love the way that even today, like lingering composition and harmony, and it sounds so flavorful and it's fun and I like it so much. Monty Cook's Bard has spell notes, spell chord, and spell songs back in 3rd edition. Is that from Book of Arcane Might? Book of Eldritch Might? Huh. I'm trying to remember what book that's from. Those names just jogged a memory in me from one of the early Malhavik press releases, I think. I'd be interested to know which one that is. Does Jim Knight have enough subs now to go live? Well, I don't think it was an issue of subs, KC. It's like YouTube had to approve my channel. But they approved my channel. So yeah, I'll probably posting this for anybody who's even remotely interested. I have a second channel that I created because I don't want to fill this channel up with a bunch of stuff. As some people have, we've talked about it on stream before. I gained a lot of weight during COVID. I think a lot of people did. And I've been trying to get the motivation to get back in shape. And I bought a home gym and I got it all set up. And of course, my patrons love to, tease me and also support me at the same time. And they said, hey, you should just, go live with your workouts and we can talk about fitness and nutrition. Because I actually do know a lot about fitness and nutrition because I used to be really big in my 20s. And then I got into great shape in my 30s. And I learned a ton about exercise and exercise programming and kinesiology and physiology. And then, when I got to my late 30s, I gained a lot of that weight back by, being depressed and lazy. And now I want to lose it again. And so I have a new channel called Gym Night, and we'll be doing our first stream there shortly thereafter. I will post something here on this channel just so you can get a link, and I will definitely be telling my patrons about it. Don't check it out if you're not interested. It's totally just going to be kind of like a low production, really super casual game or a channel, mostly so I can just share with all of you. And to be quite honest with you, just have incredible accountability. One of the hardest problems for most people when they're, exercising or losing weight is being, dedicated and having accountability. That's why a lot of people have an exercise partner, because that keeps them accountable. I don't have that, but I have, a community of awesome people who also might be on their own, fitness journeys, and that we can all share in that together. Where is the lemon? Well, no, I'm going to bring the lemon onto your show, not my show, your show. Those are the people who liked. You got to have me on your show at some point, next week or the week after that. And then when you let me know in advance, I will get a lemon. I will eat the lemon. So that's how the lemon works. For those of you who have no idea what we're talking about, yesterday on Roll for Combat, I mentioned I like eating lemons, and they kind of called me out on that. And I said, I will eat a lemon. Get the lemon out. I don't have a lemon in my house. So there's no lemon for me to go get. So by the way, I don't know if this is going to work, but some people have, what's wrong with lemons? They're delicious. How about Sour Patch Kids? No, I don't have any Sour Patch Kids here either, although I do love Sour Patch Kids. Some people, by the way, had asked me, I started to set this up and I never got a shot. I never got a chance, but let's see if this works here. Hey, look, it's the maple cam. Hey, baby. You sleepy? You sleepy? You want to go bed? You want to go night-night? It's a doggo cam. That is little Maple. Our pit beagle mix. So that is how we will end the stream. By the way, interestingly, on the corner of that screen, you can see hi. Now she's underneath it. You can see the edge of a box, which is my copy of Torchbearer 2nd edition. All right, go lay down. Go lay down. Go lay down. Now she's gone. Anyways. So. All right, now she's getting upset. Anyway, now the other dog came in because she heard getting attention. Yeah, GM Scott, I still haven't opened it. This is still my copy of Torchbearer 2nd edition, sealed in the burning wheel tape, because I have not yet opened it. So good times. Good times. Maypole, Frostjack, maypole, like a maple leaf. So not Maple. Sorry, if I might have been pronouncing it badly. But yeah, eventually I'm going to open up that Torchbearer Second Edition and dig into it after having to pay so much money for it, having failing. But yeah, we have so much games. You know, I mean, honestly, we have to have we have so many games that I want to play. It's actually crazy. It's insane how like I feel like I could go live 4 times a week and I wouldn't be able to play all the games that I want to play. There's so many games I want to play with you all. There's so many games I want to play with my friends and show and play and, you know, for the audience, or just games I want to play just for myself. It's just like, it's so too many games, not enough time. Fantasy Age Second Edition First Look When. That's actually a pretty cool game that I would probably want to do a first look on, Damien. That actually might be one that is on my list because I'm legitimately curious about that as well. My dog's name is Mabel and my daughter's name is Maeve. I am an idiot and I say the wrong name at least a dozen times at work. We love Maple too. Yes, Maple is great. And then little Zeus. Little Zeus is underneath the table, but he doesn't like to lay down in the bed as much. All right, everybody. I'm going to say goodnight, and hopefully I will catch most of you on the Discord either tonight or tomorrow. We'll be hanging out. I'll be doing some stuff up the studio. I'm not sure tomorrow what we're doing. Bob and Aaron and I might be working at the studio, but we also might be playing Abomination Vaults. So it's kind of tossed up into the air. So remains to be seen. KC says, fun stream. Well, I had a fun time with you all as well. Thank you for being part of this. John, let's see. I watched the published review release of Fantasy Age 2, and that's grown a lot too. Yeah, I think the game sounds like it has a lot of really cool things. Fantasy Age version 1 had some really cool things. It was based off the Dragon Age game, which itself was really, really cool. So, yeah, I think it's a cool concept. All right, everybody. I am going to peace out. Thanks again for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. Check out that Patreon, patreon.com/nightslastcall. And of course, if you're going to use DriveThruRPG, check out our affiliate link below. Make sure you bookmark it and use that for any of your DriveThruRPG purchases. We'll get a few percentage points and it won't cost you a dime. So we all appreciate it. Hopefully you all know where and how this money is going. It's going basically into the channel. We don't really make money here. We give it away. We buy cooler stuff for our game, our studio and all that other stuff. But without it, without you, we wouldn't have any of this. So thank you so much. And we will see you next time on Knights of Last Call. Bye, everybody.